Chapter 109. Worshipping the martial saint was a supreme honor. In the Bayou country, only a few people could enjoy such honor. Of course, it made all 120 qualified martial arts students extremely excited. Early in the morning, all the martial arts students who had received the notice had already gathered at the designated location. They were waiting to depart. In a moment, all 120 martial arts students had finished counting. Under the lead of the great honored warrior, they headed towards the Martial Saint Mountain. Along the way, these martial arts students carried the mentality of a pilgrimage and finally arrived at the foot of the Martial Saint Mountain. The Martial Saint Mountain was majestic and magnificent, as if it had been standing here since ancient times. They arrived at the foot of the mountain. The great honored warrior said, "Remember, this is the Martial Saint Mountain and is different from any other places in the secular world. You have to put away all the young master habits in your life here. Especially remember, when I don't allow you to move freely, you must not wander around. Or else, if something happens, the Zhenwu holy place will not be responsible. Do you understand?" Yes. Needless to say, these martial arts students understood the significance of the Martial Saint Mountain. "Okay, let's go now." The great honored warrior took the lead and led this group of martial arts students up the mountain path. The mountain path was rugged. If these martial arts students had not gone through strict training, most likely they would not have been able to climb up the mountain path that was almost vertical to the ground. On both sides of the mountain path were steep cliffs. Deep inside the cliff, smoke lingered and the bottom could not be seen. Only the sound of the mountain wind made these martial arts students become extremely careful. They did not dare to get distracted, not to mention wandering around. After climbing these mountain paths with great difficulty, the road condition became slightly better. Halfway up the mountain, a deep canyon was sandwiched between two peaks. They arrived before a dense forest. "Everyone, raise your head and look." The great honored warrior pointed upwards. "Do you see that towering palace in front of us? After passing through this forest, you will arrive at the entrance of the Martial Saint Palace." The great honored warrior explained patiently. "However, this forest is not an ordinary forest. There's a formation inside. Don't worry, the major formation has not been activated. Only some basic little formations have been activated. As long as you are willing to use your brain and have enough intelligence, you can pass through. If you can't pass, or if you can't pass at the designated time, then you will lose the qualification to meet the martial saint. Do you hear me?" "Yes." The martial arts student's eyes were full of eagerness. The great venerable nodded. "All right, let's go." A group of martial arts students filed in. However, Qin Wushuang was not in a hurry. According to his estimation, this place was at least a few dozen miles away from the Martial Saint Hall. This forest must be very vast, so there was no need to rush. He wanted to observe from the outside. The great honored warrior saw that all the martial arts students had gone in, and only Qin Wushuang had stayed outside. "Why don't you go in?" "Great venerable, please go first." As the saying goes, sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood. Junior will observe first. Sharpen the knife, and you'll get twice the result with half the effort. The great venerable was startled again, and a look of appreciation appeared in his eyes. A champion was indeed a champion. She didn't have an undeserved reputation. This young man was so meticulous. He had the bearing of a master at such a young age. As expected, winning the trial championship wasn't a fluke. He nodded and said, "All right, then I won't disturb you any further." After he had finished, he laughed and disappeared into the forest on the side. Of course, Qin Wushuang would not follow the great honored warrior out of boredom. He also knew clearly that the great honored warrior's current strength was still one level ahead of him. Plus, this was his territory. It would be too easy to get rid of him. Besides, following the great honored warrior was also disrespectful to his seniors. In terms of martial arts training, Qin Wushuang greatly respected seniors who had both integrity and talent. This great honored warrior was a person of virtue and prestige. He had also supported him greatly. Of course, Qin Wushuang was grateful. Of course, he would not offend the great honored warrior. He scuttled to the tall trees on both sides and looked into the distance. However, he only saw a vast expanse of lush greenery. He could not see where this forest extended to, and each of these trees were extremely tall. One could not wrap one's arms around all of them. It seems that nothing special can be seen from the outside. Qin Wushuang thought, and also scuttled into the forest. After walking for a while in the forest, Qin Wushuang discovered the wonders of this forest. It seemed that no matter where one walked, the scene would be the same. It was very confusing. It seemed that no matter where one walked, they would just be walking in the same place. Fortunately, Qin Wushuang's observation was very meticulous. Everywhere he went, he could see that these trees were only similar in shape. They were not walking in the same place. Instead, they were deliberately arranged to look like the same place to confuse people who entered this forest. Qin Wushuang made a few marks along the way to avoid walking on the same path. Something's not right. Why did I return to the place where the marks were? Qin Wushuang walked around and found that he had returned to the place where he had walked before. It seems that the formation in this forest is indeed very confusing. It can actually make people walk in circles. Qin Wushuang became very alert. This time, he was even more careful. Every step he took, he paid attention to the grass and trees around him. He did not even let go of a footprint. However, what he did not expect was that even though he was so careful, he once again returned to the place where the marks were. Qin Wushuang was slightly surprised. In his previous life, he had seen some ancient formations. However, most of the formations were just living formations. They were formations that were set up by people. It was rare to see a formation set up with the help of trees. However, it was not that he did not have a little understanding of it. Qin Wushuang remembered that when encountering such a formation, the best way to crack it was to observe the direction. But in the dense forest, how to determine the direction? There was a way to determine the specific direction according to the sunlight. Qin Wushuang observed the sunlight penetrating through the dense forest. He was deep in thought. His gaze suddenly stopped to the northwest direction. After looking for a moment, he thought, this formation does not have formation eyes everywhere. And this place, which keeps making me lose my way, should be one of the formation eyes. To get out of this formation, I must deduce it from the direction. Qin Wushuang stepped in the northwest direction. This time, he did not bother to pay attention to anything. Instead, he moved forward. This time, he was walking according to the direction, so he did not have to worry about going astray. Sure enough, after walking for so long from the northwest direction, I still haven't returned to the original place. It seems that I am walking in the right direction. Qin Wushuang pondered. This formation seemed to coincide with the 8 gates of Chimenduanjia from his previous life. The 8 gates of Chimenduanjia were Rest Gate, Life Gate, Pain Gate, Limit Gate, View Gate, Death Gate, Shock Gate, and Open Gate. Among them, Open Gate, Rest Gate, and Life Gate were the 3 auspicious gates. If it coincided with the Chimenduanjia, then to get out of this forest, as long as he took the right 3 auspicious gates, it should not be a problem to get out of this forest. After all, the Great Venerable said that this formation was not fully activated. Only a few small formations were working. Qin Wushuang pondered over the meaning of these words. Those death gates were definitely not open. But if he took the wrong path, he would definitely not be able to get out, but his life would not be in danger. But if he took the right life gate, it would be easy to get out of the forest. Understanding this point, Qin Wushuang was even more determined to walk straight towards the northwest corner. According to the 8 gates of Chimenduanjia, the open gate resided in the northwest Qian Palace, which belonged to the metal element. The northwest direction must be the direction of the open gate. The Qian trigram was the head of the 8 trigrams. In his previous life, the ancients named the gate corresponding to the Qian Palace open gate, which symbolized the beginning of all things, the gate of great luck. Therefore, in his previous life, many ancient monarchs liked to set their capital in the northwest Chang and started their business in the northwest. Since the Martial Saint Hall was the Martial Saint Hall, if it also coincided with this point, then it could be assumed that there was fate in the unseen world. No matter if it was in his previous life or this life, the principles were all the same. Thinking of this, Qin Wushuang suddenly thought of the Tao that the Great Venerable had mentioned. There was no Tao in the Tao, but it seemed very difficult to explain what it was. But in detail, it seemed that the Tao was everywhere. For example, this forest also coincided with some kind of unclear Tao. As expected, Qin Wushuang's judgment was quickly effective. Walking towards the northwest, it was indeed unobstructed. There were no more stops along the way, and in a short while, he arrived at the edge of the forest. Just as he was about to walk out, Qin Wushuang suddenly stopped in his tracks. It was as if he suddenly felt a very strange feeling. This feeling was as if his entire body had been pulled out of his original world and suddenly thrown into another small world. The forest and the green grass around Qin Wushuang seemed to have been given life all of a sudden, flourishing and giving people a feeling of unlimited vitality. This subtle feeling only lasted for a moment. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang's mind buzzed, and a sense of alarm from the depths of his heart pushed him back to reality. Looking around again, he found that he had returned to his original world, and he was only at the edge of the forest. What's going on? Qin Wushuang was rather confused. He was sure that the scene from a moment ago was not an illusion or a dream. It was the subtle feeling he had when he was there. But how come the blink of an eye, everything had disappeared like a mirage? Just as he was feeling uncertain, he realized that a green figure had appeared under a tree not far away from him without him noticing. That person had a tall figure, and only his back could be seen. His bone structure was clear and gave people a sense of being aloof and outstanding. What was even more wonderful was that when this person stood under the tree, he did not seem to make people feel any surprise or abrupt. It was as if he was supposed to be standing there, as if he himself was a part of the scenery. And the place where he stood was like an extremely freehand painting of mountains and rivers, harmonious and natural. Martial Saint. Suddenly, this thought flashed across Qin Wushuang's mind as he looked with blurred eyes. That green-robed person slowly turned around and fixed his gaze on Qin Wushuang. Suddenly, he smiled. "You are the first martial arts student to come here. Tell me, what is your name?" Qin Wushuang did not dare to neglect. "I am Qin Wushuang. It's my honor to meet you, Martial Saint." That green-robed person smiled while twirling his beard. "Qin Wushuang, indeed. You are Qin Wushuang. Unparalleled in the country. Not bad, not bad. Follow me." After he had finished, he walked out of the forest in large strides. Without hesitation, Qin Wushuang followed him. Haha, I made a mistake a moment ago. Initially, that chapter was supposed to be updated at 8 o'clock. In the end, I made a mistake and updated it ahead of time. Thus, it was a mistake to say that the chapter would be updated in an hour. Initially, I said that the third chapter would be updated at 9 o'clock, and the fourth chapter would be updated at around 10 o'clock. Yes, it's my fault. Everyone looked down on me. Haha, let's have a little fun. Today, the first Alliance leader has appeared in Galaxy. Thank you to this passionate Gagogo 1982 reader, and at the same time, thank you to all the other readers who have been enthusiastically supporting Letion. Each of your subscriptions, each ticket, each tip, regardless of the amount, is a great support for Letion. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 110. Inside the Martial Saint's palace, Qin Wushuang stood quietly. Before the Martial Saint spoke, he decided to remain silent. At the same time, Qin Wushuang's heart was also in turmoil. In both his previous and current life, it was the first time he had witnessed such a powerful aura and such a powerful pressure. Although Qin Wushuang was confident and exceptional, he could clearly feel that between him and the Martial Saint, there is still an obvious gap between him and the Martial Saint. At the age of 17, you single-handedly challenged the wealthy Su family, dealt with the Shi Min feudal lords, and won first place in the National Martial Arts student exam. Haha, in the history of the Bayou country, even the royal offspring did not have such an enchanting result. Qin Wushuang, you did well. Finally, the Martial Saint spoke. Although it was a compliment, The tone of his voice was still indifferent. Before the martial saint, Qin Wushuang still knew when to advance and when to retreat. He said calmly, "Thank you for the compliment, martial saint. It's enough for me to bring honor to my ancestors with your compliment." Although the martial saint was serious, he could not help but smile when he heard his words. He raised his head and glanced at Qin Wushuang. Suddenly, he waved his hand and motioned Qin Wushuang to come closer. Qin Wushuang walked over and said respectfully, "Please instruct me, martial saint." The martial saint did not speak. Instead, he took out a scroll from the pen holder on the table. He opened the scroll and saw it was a map. To put it precisely, it was a map of the Bayou country. All the territories, fortresses, and cities were clearly marked. Although it was not as accurate as the maps from his former world, it still looked very intuitive. The martial saint smiled lightly and threw a pen to Qin Wushuang. "This is the map of the Bayou country. The pen is in your hand. Circle and draw. Wherever you draw, that will be your fiefdom." When a martial saint had spoken these words, it sounded as if it was the right thing to do. It was more like he was talking about an ordinary matter. To him, this fiefdom was as simple as passing a piece of candy. Qin Wushuang took the pen. However, he did not know how to draw. It was not because he did not believe that the martial saint had the power or that he could not fulfill his promise. He was considering how much he should draw and how much he should draw. For the Eastwood Qin family, the highest ancestor was the wealthy class. Since they had suddenly become a royal family, for sure, it would cause a lot of discussion. If he had a big appetite for territory, he would have made a lot of enemies. There's no need to worry. Under the heavens, all lands belong to the king, and all the people who live on the shores of the land are the king's subjects. In the end, the territories in the Bayou country, the emperor. No matter if it's the land controlled by the royal family or the land of the 4 royal territories, they'll have no choice but to give up the land you've drawn. There was a trace to the martial saint's tone. He was an elite warrior, an absolute elite warrior. Since the emperor to the emperor, to the emperor, how did to the martial to saint to emperor, to be to the lord to the emperor? Without a doubt, His Majesty the Emperor had to bow down in front of the martial saint. Qin Wushuang nodded and finally, he started to draw. He did not draw much. He only drew a circle around 2,000 miles around the Great Song Mountains. It was equivalent to 2 states. The martial saint watched Qin Wushuang draw and also observed with rapt attention. When Qin Wushuang had finished drawing, he was also slightly surprised. Just this. This is enough. After Qin Wushuang had finished drawing, he also felt much more relaxed. The martial saint's authority was too strong. Under the martial saint's gaze, he had finished drawing this circle. It was even more tiring than the battle with Shimenyu. The territory of 2 prefectures is really not enough for a royal family. You must know, among the 4 royal families, each of them has 8 states. With their contributions to the country, they could have 8 states. You could have at least 16 states. The martial saint sighed with emotion. Suddenly, he nodded. "However, I admire you. When you are young, you are neither arrogant nor impatient. You are not greedy and do not decline. These are the virtues that many people who have lived for dozens of years could not achieve." For this compliment, Qin Wushuang deserved it. He had thought about it from beginning to end. The royal family's fiefdom was the reward for the martial arts student exam. If he did not take it, he would suffer a disaster. He should take it when he should. It was his responsibility, and he would not decline. However, if he took too much at once, it would give people the impression of being greedy. To a newly promoted royal family, it would not be a good thing. If he only took 2 states, the other royal families would not feel the sense of crisis. At least, everyone would live in peace on the surface. Besides, as a royal with a different surname, it would be a bit abrupt if he had more territory than someone with the same surname. Of course, it would cause a lot of controversy and push the family to the heart of the struggle. This was not something Qin Wushuang wanted to see. Thus, after many considerations, Qin Wushuang had made this decision. Of course, the Great Song Mountain must be included in the fiefdom. And since the Qin family had lived in Eastwood Town for generations, they must also include Eastwood Town as their homeland. Thus, Qin Wushuang used the Great Song Mountain as the center and spread out 2,000 or 3,000 miles as his fiefdom. Great Honored Warrior. The martial saints in different voice spread out from the palace. In a moment, the Great Honored Warrior walked in respectfully from the outside. Before the martial saint, the Great Honored Warrior acted with extreme caution. Just like the martial arts students before the Great Honored Warrior, they did not dare to step out of line with their movements. Great Martial Saint. The Great Honored Warrior said respectfully, "You still need to go down the mountain." The martial saint pointed at that map he had drawn. "Take this to Emperor He. Ask him to take care of the ownership of the territory in 10 days. The territories within this circle will be the territory of a royal with a different surname." When the martial saint said here, he glanced at Qin Wushuang. "By the way, have you thought of a name for this territory?" Qin Wushuang said, "I haven't thought about this matter. Please grant me a name." The martial saint laughed. "This is easy. Just name it after you. It'll be named Wushuang, Wushuang Royal Territory. And you'll be named King Wushuang. How about it?" Great Martial Saint. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang bowed and said, "My father is still alive. I do not dare to steal the title. Please give it to my father." "Oh." The martial saint thought for a moment and nodded. "All right, the son will inherit the father's legacy. In the future, when your father passes away, it will be natural for you to inherit the throne. All right, then you'll be named Marquis Wushuang. However, this way, your father will have to give another title. Please make the decision." "Yes, Great Honored Warrior. Regarding the Qin clan's patriarch title, you should let the emperor think about it. Remember to emphasize 10 days. I understand. Besides, all material rewards must be given at the same time. As for the construction of the royal city, we will start after the Qin family has discussed and come up with a plan. All expenses will be paid by the royal family." "Yes." The Great Honored Warrior put away the map and did not linger. After he saluted, he turned around and left the martial saint palace. Qin Wushuang was extremely grateful. Indeed, this martial saint had considered everything thoroughly. He almost did not need to add anything. However, there was the so-called saying, one should not receive a reward without any effort. The higher the reward, the more generous the reward. On the other hand, he would have more expectations for Qin Wushuang. "All right, let's stop with these mundane matters. Marquis Wushuang, follow me." The martial saint smiled lightly and walked out of the palace. In a moment, he brought Qin Wushuang to a garden full of flowers. This garden was beautifully decorated. Regardless of which angle one looked at it, it had completely merged with nature and gave people a feeling of endless vitality. The martial saint sat on a stone bench leisurely and said, "I heard from the Great Honored Warrior that you have exceptional talent in martial arts. Now you have some doubts, right? If I could receive some advice from you, I would be extremely grateful." The martial saint waved his hand. "No need. In martial arts training, there's a hierarchy. I'm only a few years older than you. It is my duty to guide the younger generation." After he had finished speaking, traces of sadness emerged from his eyes. "Qin Wushuang, do you know? How long have I stayed on this martial saint mountain?" "How long?" Qin Wushuang could not help but ask. 120 years. Suddenly, the tone of the martial saint was filled with vicissitudes of life. It was as if he was sighing at the passing of time and feeling helpless. "In these 120 years, every day, I hoped that there would be a young man on the martial saint mountain that I could give some advice to. However, things did not go as I wished. Until today, I finally had this opportunity." Qin Wushuang felt a chill inwardly. 120 years? Could it be that in the past 120 years, no one could enter the eyes of the martial saint? No need to be surprised. It's been 120 years. Flowers have bloomed and withered at the martial saint mountain. During this period, there have been many visitors. However, in the end, no one could enter my eyes. Those so-called proud sons and daughters of the secular world, when they came to the martial saint mountain, in the end, they were only quails trembling in fear. What I need is not a disciple. Qin Wushuang suddenly raised his head. From the eyes of the martial saint, there was a strong expectation. Every inch of the intention that shot out from those eyes showed his love for talent. Qin Wushuang was moved inwardly. Could the martial saint mean? The martial saint slowly nodded. What I need is an heir. In the next 150 years, an heir that can take charge of the martial saint mountain, protect the Bayou country, support the Bayou country, and protect the hundreds of millions of people in the Bayou country. Qin Wushuang only felt that his mouth and tongue were dry. In fact, the martial saint had already extended his olive branch. However, he could not understand. Since the martial saint was an upper sky realm warrior, why did he want him, a pre-sky realm warrior, to be his heir? Didn't he have the so-called spiritual affinity? Could it be that the martial saint did not need this procedure? Or could it be that he had a special ability to determine if he had the spiritual affinity? With all kinds of doubts filling his chest, Qin Wushuang did not dare to speak recklessly. Before coming here, he had never thought about taking charge of the martial saint mountain. And to protect the Bayou country, support the Bayou country, and protect the hundreds of millions of people in the Bayou country, Qin Wushuang had never thought that he would shoulder such a huge burden. It was too sudden, too sudden. Warriors of the Milky Way galaxy, after a day of hard work, I've already written 13,000 words. Haha, now it's your turn to fight. I will save my energy and come again tomorrow. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 111. The martial saint stared straight into Qin Wushuang's eyes. Apparently, the martial saint was observing Qin Wushuang's inner thoughts. Marquis Wushuang, just say what is on your mind. The martial saint smiled lightly. He also knew that to a young man, this question was somewhat sudden. For sure, he would not be able to calm down after hearing it. Qin Wushuang took a deep breath and decided not to think about this question for now. Instead, he would first solve his doubts regarding martial arts training. He raised his head and asked seriously, Martial Saint, I would like to ask if you have already entered the spiritual martial force, and how is this spiritual martial force divided? The martial saint revealed a knowing smile. He knew that for sure. Qin Wushuang would ask this question. At the moment, he nodded without hesitation. If I had not entered the upper sky spiritual martial force, how could I be in charge of the martial saint mountain? As for how the spiritual martial force is divided, I will keep you in suspense. Let me ask you, do you know the difference between the spiritual martial force and the genuine force? Qin Wushuang had vaguely heard the great honored warrior mention it. However, he did not know much about it. The great honored warrior once said that to break through the shackles of the genuine force and enter the upper sky realm, the most important thing is one word. That is the understanding of Tao. Perhaps the difference between the two is this Tao, right? What is Tao? The martial saint asked. Answer with your understanding. Qin Wushuang thought for a moment. He could not explain the Tao of martial arts training in detail. However, in his former world, he had dabbled in the Taoist culture. He said in a low voice, there is no Tao. Human language should not be able to accurately describe what Tao is. However, there is Tao in the heavens, and the movement of all things in the world has Tao. This Tao is most likely the origin and rules of all things in the universe. The martial saint looked at this young man with a face full of astonishment. It was not that he was not satisfied with Qin Wushuang's answer, but that the martial saint had never expected that Qin Wushuang would give such an answer. For your information, even he, the martial saint, did not expect the answer given by Qin Wushuang in terms of the macroscopic logic. An offspring of a lowly aristocratic family living in the countryside could speak such a profound logic? Could he truly be a demon from the legends? Martial saint, I spoke without thinking. Did I deviate from the topic? Qin Wushuang could not help but ask when he saw the strange expression on the martial saint's expression. The martial saint shook his head and sighed. You did not deviate. You did not deviate. You're absolutely right. This was the deepest meaning of Tao. What else was there to say? Marquis Wushuang, you to me, you. Martial forces, the martial arts realms, eyes, the details is Dao, the martial Dao and eyes. The martial Dao. The martial saint waved his hand. Or else, if the big logic is understood, the small logic would not be blocked. Marquis Wushuang, let me tell you, the genuine force stage trains the chi. Even if you were at the peak of the genuine force, you would only be at the peak of the inner strength and could only use the power of your body to attack your opponent. An upper sky, what is the upper sky? It is the power of stealing from the heavens. You can use the natural power of heaven and earth, and with the body as a medium, you can unleash attacks 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000 times stronger than a genuine force warrior. Don't look at the genuine force warriors of the secular world as if they are standing at the peak. Once they meet a spiritual martial force warrior, they can turn a stage 9 genuine force warrior into ashes with just one finger. 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times stronger? Qin Wushuang knew that there was a huge gap between the pre-sky realm and the upper sky realm. The difference between the two must be huge. He had never expected the difference to be so huge. He was now at stage 9 of the genuine force. If he attacked with all his power, the power would be extraordinary. And on top of his current foundation, what would it mean to increase his power by 10 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times? Marquis Wushuang, do you think I am exaggerating? Suddenly, the martial saint stood up and pointed at the stone stool he was sitting on a moment ago. If Marquis Wushuang were to attack, could you break this stone stool from 10 meters away? 10 meters? Inwardly, Qin Wushuang wiped his sweat. The inner strength from the body could attack from a distance, and it could also injure people. However, it could only be from 3 meters away. In order to create the most destructive power, it must be a physical object. Only when the power of the palm was solid could the power be maximized. As for beyond 10 meters, perhaps Qin Wushuang could push the stone stool with his palm power. However, to break it, he would need to be at least 3 meters away. The martial saint smiled lightly and walked out 10 steps. Each step was about 1 meter away. When he was 10 meters away, he slowly stopped. Suddenly, he turned his head and clenched his 5 fingers into a ball. A green handprint kept jumping in the center of the martial saint's palm. It was like a spirit with form, but no substance. Suddenly, the martial saint raised his arm and swung it at the stone stool. Qin Wushuang only saw a flash of green light before his eyes. Crash! With a crisp sound, in the next moment, the stone stool had completely disappeared from its original place. And on the ground, there was only a pile of broken stones. Not a single piece of stone the size of a finger could be found. It had completely turned into dust. Qin Wushuang inhaled a breath of cold air and looked at the scene in front of him with astonishment. Was this the power of the upper sky realm? Thinking about it, if the martial saint had aimed this attack at him, Qin Wushuang, there was no need to think about the consequences. He could only nurse a grievance. Upper sky realm, spiritual martial force. Qin Wushuang carefully thought about these few concepts. Inwardly, a wave of yearning that he had never felt before emerged. Marquis Wushuang, I only used 30% of my power. The words of the martial saint made Qin Wushuang even more dumbfounded. Only 30% of his power was already so terrifying. With such attack power, even if 10 stage 9 warriors of the genuine force attacked together, it would be like chopping melons and vegetables. There would not be any chance of luck. Indeed, there is a world of difference between the upper sky realm and the lower sky realm. The martial saint walked closer slowly. Marquis Wushuang, you have supreme talent and superior strength. To me, it is only a matter of time before you enter the upper sky realm. It's a pity that people like us who were born in vassal countries don't have spiritual roots. To enter the upper sky realm, you must pass the dashing stage. Qin Wushuang could not help but ask. Earlier, I heard from the great honored warrior that in this world, there are people who are born with spiritual roots. I wonder how many of these upper sky realm talents are there in the Tian Xian land. The martial saint's expression was solemn. After a while, he shook his head with a bitter smile. I cannot answer your question. As for how big the Tian land is and how many powerful people exist from my position, I can only see the surface. Qin Wushuang was shocked. This way, there are many people who were born with a golden spoon in their mouths. The martial saint nodded helplessly. I am afraid that is the case. However, he immediately changed the topic. Being born with a golden spoon in their mouths does not mean they are superior to those who broke into the upper sky realm from the pre-sky realm. Each person has their own unique fortune. This fortune is extremely miraculous. From what I know, in the Tianxian land, many elite warriors relied on their hard work to break into the upper sky realm. Then they cannot be stopped and left behind those who were born with a golden spoon in their mouths. In the end, it was still 4 words: heaven rewards the diligent. Of course, not all hard work would be rewarded by the heavenly Tao. The cultivation of the martial Tao also depended on one's luck, fortune, and luck. Being diligent would not necessarily create an elite warrior. However, to forever stand in an invincible position, they must be the most hard-working type. Martial saint, this way. Most likely, most of us martial arts students do not have spiritual roots. I'm almost certain that none of us have spiritual roots. In a place like the Bayou country, the probability of being born with spiritual roots is too low. It's because in this country, there is not enough spiritual chi to nurture spiritual roots. Only those high-level empires have a higher probability of having people with spiritual roots. However, there's a limit to how high the spiritual roots are. It's impossible for there to be as many spiritual roots as pigs and dogs. Perhaps, in our Bayou country, we would have one person with spiritual roots every 100 years. And those big empires would have one every 3 to 5 years, or even few in a year. This was something that couldn't be compared. In the Tianxian land, our Bayou is a low-level civilization. This was the reality that he had to admit. No one could change the matter of one's birth. Since there were 2 ways to enter the upper sky martial force. One was to have the spiritual roots, and the other was to successfully break into the upper sky realm. In the end, God was still fair. Everyone had the opportunity. So what if you were born with a golden spoon in your mouth? In his former world, there was a very common but reasonable old saying, getting fat first is not fat, but getting fat later will crush you. As a person of 2 lifetimes, the thing Qin Wushuang did not lack the most was ambition. That kind of unyielding character that feared neither the heavens nor the earth. Since the martial saint had said that many elite warriors in the Tianxian land had broken into the upper sky martial force through the pre-sky realm, they had shaken off those people with spiritual roots. This had given Qin Wushuang even more courage. The unyielding blood in his bones had also started to boil. When the martial saint saw the change in Qin Wushuang's expression vividly, he also sensed this young man's strong willpower and mental strength. Inwardly, he was also overjoyed. From this young man, he saw a kind of legendary spirit. It was a temperament that had never been seen among the disciples of the Bayou country. Unyielding, uncompromising, and fearless. Marquis Wushuang, perhaps, among the 120 of you, not one has the spiritual roots. However, this does not mean that you are not qualified to receive the spiritual roots. This spiritual roots refers to whether or not you have the potential to reach the spiritual martial force, and not just the spiritual roots. You must be clear about this problem. You must never belittle yourself because you do not have the spiritual roots. Qin Wushuang gave a carefree smile. Great martial saint. In my dictionary, there is no such thing as belittling myself. Spiritual roots? I only heard one sentence. Getting fat first is not fat, but getting fat later will crush you. Even if I break into the pre-sky martial force, I have the confidence to surpass those people with a golden spoon in their mouth. He was high-spirited, heroic, and filled with a domineering aura that seemed to indicate that he was willing to sacrifice his own expectations. Today, it's still 4 chapters. Perhaps it will be more in the afternoon or 3 in the evening. This morning, I didn't even get a single monthly ticket. So depressing. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. More chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 112. The martial saint laughed. Great. The most precious thing about you is your incomparable temperament. Challenging the wealthy class, threatening the Shi-Min feudal lords, and taking first place in a martial arts student exam, I could see your indomitable temperament. It's also the reason why I think highly of you. Of course, it's still uncertain whether you have a natural spiritual roots. I am ashamed that the Bayou country does not have the method to test the natural spiritual roots. However, this exam was not organized by the Bayou country. It originated from a mother country of the Bayou. At this point, the martial saint's voice turned low. Therefore, your final destination for this trial is the suzerain nation. Mother country? After all, Qin Wushuang was not a native of this world. He did not have a deep-rooted concept of the mother country. Vaguely, he remembered that the mother country of the Bayou country was a middle-ranking empire from the eastern part of the Tianxian land. In the Tianxian land, the middle-ranking empire's strength was only below the upper-ranking empire. It was one of the few advanced civilizations in the Tianxian land. In the Tianxian land, there were only 3 upper-ranking empires, and there were 9 middle-ranking empires. The Great Luo Empire was one of the 9 middle-ranking empires. Qin Wushuang said, "Martial Saint, I heard that the results of this exam will directly affect the ranking and position of the Bayou country. Yes, under the jurisdiction of the Great Luo Empire, there are a few dozen subordinate countries. There are also 10 middle-ranking subordinate countries like the Bayou. As for the upper-ranking subordinate countries, there are only 3. However, for this exam, the Great Luo Empire promised to give 2 spots to the upper-ranking subordinate countries. In this exam, the 2 middle-ranking subordinate countries that have contributed the most will be promoted to the upper-ranking subordinate countries." The martial saint continued to speak. "To the Bayou country, this is a rare opportunity to change our status. Once we become an upper-ranking subordinate country, the living environment of the entire Bayou country will greatly improve. After all, most of the subordinate countries around us are middle-ranking subordinate countries. Once we become an upper-ranking subordinate country, we will have the advantage of status and no need to worry about being invaded by the surrounding subordinate countries." Qin Wushuang nodded silently. Inwardly, he thought that indeed, the entire world had a strict hierarchy. From small individuals to large countries, there was such a clear division of levels. "Martial Saint, how about this opportunity for our Bayou country?" When the martial saint mentioned this topic, a trace of a smile emerged on his face. Initially, our Bayou country did not have any special advantages among the 10 subordinate countries. However, things are different now. All of this is because of you. Oh, Qin Wushuang blinked. He was very curious. 600 points, Marquis Wushuang. Your exam result alone is equivalent to the result of 3 other people. This amount of contribution points is not ordinary. Thus, most likely, our Bayou country will stand out in this election. However, the specific results would have to be announced by the Great Luo Empire's officials. Our results have already been sent to the suzerain. I believe it won't be long before the results are out. Of course, this result is only for the preliminary test. If you want to be recognized, you will have to go through the examination and verification of a suzerain country. The martial saint's tone became more cautious as he spoke. "All right, that's all for later." The martial saint waved his hand. "Marquis Wushuang, let's get back to the topic. Now, I will talk to you about the division of the spiritual martial force." Qin Wushuang raised his brow. This was what he was most concerned about. "Please, martial saint, teach me." Haha. The so-called spiritual martial force is to borrow the natural power and use the body as a medium to unleash great power. However, think about it. Since the body is a medium, it is like a ship. How much it can carry depends on the size of the ship. Thus, the spiritual martial force does not need to break away from the body. On the contrary, the body will be strengthened. The stronger the body's capacity, the more natural power it can borrow. Naturally, the power of the attack will be greater. However, the strength of the body's capacity does not equate to the power of the attack. While having a strong capacity, you must also have excellent control skills. For example, your body can carry 30% of a natural power. However, if you do not have enough control skills, you can only unleash 10% of the power. Naturally, your attack power would not be comparable to those spiritual martial force warriors who can perfectly unleash 20% of the power. Do you understand this principle? Qin Wushuang thought for a moment and nodded. I understand. To put it simply, having this power is one thing. Unleashing this power is another. You must have both to unleash 100% of the power. The martial saint nodded with gratification. Good, you can be taught, haha. Then, he said, the spiritual martial force is different from the power force and the genuine force. There are only 4 stages. The initial stage, middle stage, advanced stage, and the perfect stage. For stages? Qin Wushuang thought and could not help but ask. Then, what are the boundaries of these 4 stages? It's simple. The initial stage can carry 10% of the natural power. The middle stage can carry 20% of the natural power. The advanced stage can carry 30% of the natural power. When a martial saint said here, he stopped. His eyes were filled with a complicated expression. Then what about the perfect stage? Qin Wushuang could not help but ask. Perfect stage. From the tone of the martial saint, there was a trace of longing. Regarding the details of the perfect stage, from my position, I have no way to know. I heard that at the perfect stage, one can carry 50% of the natural power and control it freely. In between movements, the sky and earth would change color, and the earth would collapse. The sky and earth would change color, and the earth would collapse. When he heard these words, Qin Wushuang's blood instantly boiled. This was the supreme stage recorded in the upper sky Pil Dao from his former world. Upper sky. Never had Qin Wushuang felt such urgency and longing for the upper sky realm as he did now. Martial Saint, in the Tianxian land, are there any elite warriors at the perfect stage? I'm not sure if there are or not. However, according to my speculation, there must be. The Martial Saint said coldly, our Bayou country is only a middle subordinate country, and we already have initial stage warriors. Then, it's not strange for those big empires to have advanced stage warriors. And it's not strange for those hidden sects behind those big empires to have perfect stage warriors. Although this answer could not satisfy Qin Wushuang's curiosity, it was enough. At least, he had grasped a little bit of information. He also had a much richer understanding of the Tianxian land than before. He was no longer as clueless as before. Lord Martial Saint, judging from your tone, your cultivation, with this old man's cultivation, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's the initial stage. It can carry 10% of the natural power. However, due to the lack of spiritual martial techniques at the initial stage, it can only be considered average. From what I know, the martial saint of the Great Wu country, which is also a middle subordinate country, is slightly weaker than me in terms of carrying the natural power. However, because he has a good spiritual martial technique in terms of actual combat, he might be slightly better than me. The Bayou country and the Great Wu country had always been irreconcilable. The balance of power between them had never been broken. It was also because each country had a martial saint overseeing it. Once this balance was broken, most likely, the situation would change. Thus, both countries had placed great importance on this exam. They wanted to use this opportunity to become an upper subordinate country and gain an overwhelming advantage. All right, we've delayed long enough. I believe that group of martial arts students should have almost walked out of the forest. Marquis Wushuang, are you going to regroup with them here? Or we'll go down a mountain first. Can I go down the mountain first? Qin Wushuang said, then I've decided to go down the mountain first. All right, after you go down the mountain, you should be returning to Eastwood Town, right? If the royal family is efficient, I believe that when you get home, all the rewards should have arrived. The martial saint nodded and instructed again. Marquis Wushuang, the time to go to the Great Luo Empire will be in 3 months. Within these 3 months, this old man hopes that you will carefully consider this old man's previous proposal. Martial Saint, I will consider it seriously. If one day I can enter the upper sky realm, regardless of taking over the Martial Saint Mountain, I will always be a citizen of the Bayou country. I will not stand by and do nothing when it comes to the matters of the Bayou country. To any martial arts student in the Bayou country, taking over the Martial Saint Mountain was something they would never dream of. If this honor was given to anyone else, even if it was the Crown Prince, he would most likely choose to take over the Martial Saint Mountain without hesitation. He would become the next Martial Saint, and not the Emperor. The Martial Saint was the backbone and pillar of country. He was the true supreme authority. His power were even more powerful than the Emperor of the Bayou country. However, Qin Wushuang's personality was like this. In his former world, people called him a martial arts fanatic and a martial arts madman. It was because he was obsessed with martial arts. He would never betray his freedom for a moment of glory and glory. He liked to explore martial arts without any restrictions, and not the so-called power to rule the world. His understanding of martial arts had his own set of theories. The pursuit of martial arts was like a heavenly steed soaring across the sky. It emphasized freedom. If he lost his freedom, he would face many obstacles on the path of martial arts. This was not a situation he was willing to accept. Thus, he did not covet the position of the Martial Saint. Of course, it did not mean that he would not care about the fate of the Bayou country. After all, he was now a citizen of the Bayou country. Each of his actions had the mark of the Bayou country. If the Bayou country was in trouble, he would also face difficulties. Besides, the current Eastwood Qin family was already the royal family of the Bayou country. Even if he did not accept the invitation from the Martial Saint, he must contribute to this royal status. The Martial Saint looked at Qin Wushuang's back as he walked down the mountain and felt somewhat lost. He also admitted that he had some selfish motives. He wanted to tie this outstanding young man to the Bayou country. However, he had to admit that the future of this Marquis Wushuang would not be something a small temple like the Bayou country could tolerate. After all, a dragon was not a fish in a pond. The 3rd and 4th chapters will be published from 2030 to 2230. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. More chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 113. Those martial arts students wandering in the dense forest did not know that at this moment, their fates had been completely separated from Qin Wushuang's. After hearing the words from the Martial Saint, Qin Wushuang felt as if he had seen the light all of a sudden. Without any doubts, he also had a firmer goal on the path of martial arts training. With this goal in mind, Qin Wushuang became even more determined. Qin Wushuang was eager to return home and did not linger any longer. He guessed that perhaps, at this moment, the news of him winning first place in the exam had already reached his hometown and his father's ears. When he thought here, a wave of warmth surged in Qin Wushuang's heart. If he had to say what he was worried about in this world, it would be that warm home in Eastwood Town. When he thought here, he did not linger any longer. He spurred the horse and started on his journey home. There was a famous saying in his former world that if one did not return home after gaining riches, it would be like walking at night in brocade clothes. Qin Wushuang did not have any worldly thoughts of returning home in glory. However, it was an unexpected surprise that his family had become a royal. It would be a lie to say that he was not happy. After spurring the horse at full speed, he had arrived at the Redwood Royal City in a few days. Now, the sky was already dark. Qin Wushuang did not rest as he planned to continue his journey under the cover of the night. He ate some food and was about to leave. Suddenly, he saw a figure standing on the street. She glanced at him and turned to leave. Qin Wushuang was stunned. Wasn't that Tong Yao? How come she did not come to greet him when she saw him, but turned to leave? From her eyes, it seemed that she had something to say. Qin Wushuang was stunned. Then, he realized that it might not be convenient for Tong Yao to come in and greet him. At the moment, he put down the food and quickly followed her. After following for a while, he arrived at a remote alley. However, he saw Tong Yao's figure enter a house. Qin Wushuang also followed in. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Tong Yao waiting there with a serious expression. "Young Master Qin, you have good eyes." "Miss Tong, why did you leave me here?" "Young Master Qin, the current Redwood Royal City is fraught with danger, and there are many spies. We must be on our guard." Crisis after crisis. What's going on? Tong Yao's expression was a bit solemn. She glanced at Qin Wushuang and hesitated for a moment before finally opening her mouth. "Brother Qin, you seem to be in a hurry. Did you hear something? Or did he return to Prince Akaji early?" "Then it's settled, so I came back early." "What news?" Qin Wushuang had a bad premonition. Brother Qin, I've already said that you have to stay calm." Tong Yao had a worried look on her face. "Please speak, Miss Tong. I can handle it." "Brother Qin, your exam result has reached Prince Akaji a few days ago. Through the venerable De Shi family, you have reached Eastwood Town. It was De Shi Ming, the eldest young master of the venerable De Shi family, who had delivered the letter. Apparently, the Shi Min feudal lords had received the news first. They had taken the initiative to break off the engagement with the venerable De Shi family. Their intentions were clear. But what? Qin Wushuang had not expected that the Shi Min feudal lords would take the initiative to break off the engagement. After all, he had already reached an agreement with Shi Minyu. When young Master De Shi Ming received this good news, he immediately went to Eastwood Town to tell your sister. Then, for some unknown reason, young Master De Shi and your sister both went missing while they were playing in the Great Song Mountains." "What?" Qin Wushuang's heart tightened. "Both went missing?" "Yes, both went missing. The time when it happened was when you were at the Martial Saint Mountain. It's been 3 or 4 days since then." Tong Yao also felt uneasy when she saw Qin Wushuang's ugly expression. Where did Miss Tong get the news? Qin Wushuang tried hard to suppress his emotions. He told himself that he must not lose his composure at this time. He must stay calm. "We have an intelligence network in River County. Your family's elite warriors have already started to move out and search everywhere. Currently, there are no new developments. If I had not received a message from the imperial capital saying that someone had seen you leave, I would not have waited for you here." Qin Wushuang took a deep breath. He knew that Tong Yao had good intentions. "Miss Tong, regardless of the result, I, Qin Wushuang, owe you another favor." Tong Yao immediately waved her hand. "Don't say that. Last time, we were not familiar with each other and made it seem like we were making a deal. Now, you have helped the Tong family so much. I have already treated you as a friend. Between friends, there is no need to talk about favors." Qin Wushuang nodded. "Okay, I will remember Miss Tong's words in my heart. Right now, I am burning with anxiety and will not stay here any longer. I will leave first." "Hold on." Tong Yao bit her lips lightly. She seemed to be making a difficult decision. After a moment, she made up her mind and said, "Young Master Qin, your sister's disappearance might not be an accident. I received a letter from Tong Yen. He said that you had fought for justice for a few old women in the imperial capital. It also came from our Prince Akaji, right?" When Qin Wushuang heard this, he felt a heavy blow to his chest. He suddenly thought of many things. Didn't those old women also say that their daughters had disappeared for no reason and that they had no one to turn to for help? Could it be that his sister's disappearance was the same as those people? Now he finally understood why he had such a thoughtful feeling. It turned out that deep in his heart, he had always had such a subconscious thought, and the source of this subconscious thought might be the demon that his sister had mentioned before. All these years, that demon had been enduring silently. Could it be that he had finally made a move? He nodded. Maybe this is not a coincidence. "Miss Tong, thank you for your reminder. After all, I will go back and check it out myself." Tong Yao nodded. "Yes, young Master Qin, I have something to say. If you need help, please tell me. Tong Yao, will not shirk my duty." "Okay, with Miss Tong's words, if I need help, I will not hesitate to ask." "Okay, then young Master Qin should go back quickly. Tong Yao is waiting for you in the Redwood Royal City. However, Young Master Qin's actions in the Redwood Royal City should be low-key. According to my information, the Redwood King is very angry because his youngest son, He Yuchong, lost the first place in the trial. He seems to be very unhappy with you, the dark horse that appeared out of nowhere. Qin Wushuang was too lazy to pay attention to this and said coldly, "Whether he is unhappy or not, it has nothing to do with me. Don't mess with me, and everything will be over. If you mess with me, even if he is the Redwood King, I will deal with him until the end." Tong Yao looked at Qin Wushuang's disdainful attitude and felt complicated. She admired him, but she was also slightly worried. Becoming enemies with the Redwood King was definitely not a rational thing to do. But some things, when Tong Yao thought of that possibility, she immediately cut off her own thoughts. She was not willing to think in that direction. If that was really the case, then it would be very difficult for Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang bid farewell to Tong Yao and changed to a good horse. Under the starry night, he quickly rushed back to Eastwood Town. After a day and 2 nights, he finally arrived at Eastwood Town in the early morning of the 3rd day. When the blind dates in Eastwood Town saw Qin Wushuang had returned, they all cheered. However, when they thought about what had happened to the Qin family, they did not dare to celebrate too much. They all looked at Qin Wushuang with a strange expression. Qin Wushuang did not have the time to be courteous as he rushed back to the Qin manor. Young Master Qin is back. Now the Qin family has a backbone. Haha, I hope Miss Qin will be blessed by God. Such a good girl, if she's gone like this. I can only say that God does not have eyes. Nothing will happen to her, for sure. Qin Wushuang turned a deaf ear and rushed back to the manor in one breath. When the manor's servant guarding the door saw Qin Wushuang, he rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Young Master is back. Young Master. Qin Wushuang jumped down from the horse and asked directly, "Is Master home?" Yes. Patriarch she is also here." Qin Wushuang threw the horse's reins and rushed directly to the main hall. At this time, Qin Lianshan and Shi Heng were analyzing the terrain of the Great Song Mountains and making a new search plan. At this time, the elites of the 2 families had already moved out. When they saw Qin Wushuang had returned, Qin Lianshan was stunned. The Shi Heng could not help but stand up. "Father, Patriarch Shi." As soon as Qin Wushuang entered the door, he asked, "Did you find any clues?" "There is one clue. However, it was at the edge of a cliff, and there seemed to be traces of a fight. And the enemy had left safely after the fight. We are following the route that person left and searching." "Is there a mark on the map?" Qin Wushuang walked closer and glanced at the map. He found that the cliff marked on the map was the cliff that he often went to after training. "I will go take a look." Qin Wushuang was burning with impatience. He did not bother to greet them and walked out in large strides. Wushuang. Qin Lianshan immediately yelled, "Father, Patriarch Shi, I will go first. You guys take a few more people and bring some tools and ropes. If necessary, I will go down the cliff and take a look." To Qin Wushuang, the Great Song Mountains was a walk in the park, and there were no obstacles. Soon, Qin Wushuang arrived at the edge of the cliff. The scene had already been protected and was guarded by a few members of the bear team. When they saw the young master had arrived, each of the members was abnormally excited. Qin Wushuang waved his hand and motioned them not to be overly courteous. He bent down and started to observe the surroundings. After a while, he moved closer to the edge of the cliff and looked down. There was a fierce fight here, and the grass and trees were destroyed. There was also dirt falling down. As Qin Wushuang spoke, he used one of his hands to grab a rock on the edge of the cliff. His body was already floating above the cliff. Both of his hands kept moving downwards and observed each of the grass and trees on the cliff. Indeed, he saw many of them had fallen down. Qin Wushuang shook his arms and jumped up. He frowned even more. Most likely, someone had fallen down from this cliff. According to his speculation, it was most likely De Shiming. If the murderer was that demon, then his sister would not be in any danger. At least for now. However, if De Shiming was with his sister, then it would be hard to say. When he thought here, he ordered, You guys stay here, I will go down and take a look. When a master and patriarch Shi come, just let them wait here. After he had finished speaking, Qin Wushuang did the same thing. Both of his hands grabbed onto the protruding rocks on the cliff and continued to slide down. To him, it was as if he was walking on flat ground. There were 2 chapters in front of him, and the one behind him was chapter 113. Li Tian had suffered because he did not learn math well. The content is different. It will not affect everyone's reading. The evening update is a bit later than the agreed time. Sorry. The next chapter will not be later than 22:30. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 114. This cliff was shrouded in clouds and mist. Looking from above, it looked like a bottomless abyss. The sea of mist was boundless, and one could not tell where the end was or where the bottom of the cliff was. One could not help but feel goosebumps when one looked at it. However, Qin Wushuang felt as if he was walking on flat ground. Soon, he had descended 400 or 500 meters. Although it was only 400 or 500 meters, Qin Wushuang could not see the top when he raised his head. He could only see the mist. According to Qin Wushuang's observation, the vegetation on this cliff had obvious signs of destruction. The person who had descended must have used his hands to grab at it, but he did not manage to catch it. However, even if that was the case, it should have slowed down the fall. Or else, it would not have looked like this. After descending another 100 or 200 meters, Qin Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes wide. A few dozen meters down, there seemed to be a pine tree growing horizontally, and something was hanging on the branches of the pine tree. When he looked carefully, it was indeed a person. Looking at that figure, it seemed to be De Shi Ming. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was shocked. He did not dare to let his guard down. He groped his way closer to take a look. Indeed, it was De Shi Ming. His body was stuck in the branches and swaying. He did not know if he was dead or alive. Qin Wushuang checked his breathing and found that he was still breathing weakly. Feeling joyful, he inspected De Shi Ming's body. He discovered that De Shi Ming's injuries were not from the fall, but from the internal strength of an elite warrior. If it were not for De Shi Ming's solid foundation, most likely his body would have become stiff. Apparently, he had relied on his strong foundation as a stage 5 genuine force warrior to keep his breathing. Since the bones had not moved, it would not be a problem to move him. Qin Wushuang lifted De Shi Ming and used their belts to wrap De Shi Ming on his back. Then he climbed up step by step. De Shi Ming was dizzy and unconscious. Both of his hands were hanging down on Qin Wushuang's shoulders. From the corner of Qin Wushuang's eyes, he saw that De Shi Ming was holding something tightly. Curious, Qin Wushuang used one of his hands to pry open De Shi Ming's palm. It was a piece of top-quality silk cloth. Qin Wushuang's heart trembled. The color and texture of this cloth clearly isn't something a woman would wear. It is also far different from De Shi Ming's clothes. Could it be this cloth was torn from the enemy? Qin Wushuang didn't have time to think too much about saving people. After putting away the cloth, he continued to climb upwards. Carrying a person on his back obviously affected his movements. Fortunately, when he climbed 200 to 300 meters, he could already see a blurry shadow above. He hurriedly pulled a rope down vertically. Qin Wushuang borrowed the strength of the rope and stepped on the cliff in a few steps. He put De Shi Ming on the ground and pressed one of his palms on the vital acupoints on De Shi Ming's back. A stream of pure sun force slowly entered his body. He knew that De Shi Ming's internal injuries were severe. He must send in genuine qi to help him recover. His life was saved. Indeed, as soon as the genuine qi entered his body, De Shi Ming slowly woke up. Little Xiao was taken away. Big brother De Shi, calm down and control your emotions. Qin Wushuang sent in another stream of genuine qi. Finally, he managed to calm De Shi Ming's frantic emotions. De Shi Hung walked over with concern. Ming heir, Patriarch De Shi, big brother De Shi will be fine. Father, after searching for so many days, did you find the enemy's escape route? Qin Lianshan said, "This person is extremely cunning. We couldn't find any clues along the way. We used this area as the core and searched all possible escape routes. However, we found nothing." Qin Wushuang nodded. "Let everyone return to the Qin Manor. There's no need to search anymore." "No more searching?" Both Qin Lianshan and Shi Hung were surprised. Since the enemy could throw Big Brother Shi off the cliff, it would be easy for them to escape. Besides, after so many days, even the slightest clue would be a mess. "There's no need to search anymore." "Wushuang, what about your sister?" Qin Lianshan loved his daughter dearly and was also extremely anxious. If they were at the Qin Manor, he was confident that he would never let anyone kidnap his woman. However, the Great Song Mountains stretched for thousands of miles, and there were too many variables. "Father, you don't need to blame yourself. The enemy's strength is not ordinary. He will always have a chance to deal with my sister, unless she never leaves the house and hides in the Qin Manor forever." He stood up and ordered, "Everyone, go down the mountain. There is nothing left to search here." He ordered a stretcher to be prepared and carried Shi Ming down the mountain. Shi Ming's current symptoms were only internal injuries and fainting. As long as he was given the right medicine, he would be fully recovered in 10 days or half a month. "Father, I have a question." "What is it?" "Which shop provides the clothes for the aristocrats in Eastwood Town?" "It's the Fong family. The Fong family's clothing shop has always been famous." "Okay." Qin Wushuang nodded and said, "I am going out." After he had finished speaking, he left the Qin Manor and walked towards the Fong family's clothing shop. The Fong family's clothing shop was located on the busiest street in town. When they saw Qin Wushuang arrive, the shop assistant immediately greeted him with enthusiasm. "Young Master Qin, are you looking for our young Master Fong?" "No. Is your boss here?" "Young Master Qin, the boss is not here at the moment. If you need anything, I can help you." "Okay, come and take a look. Is this made in our town?" Qin Wushuang handed over that piece of cloth that Shi Ming was holding in his hand. That assistant took it and looked at it for a moment. Then he smiled. No. This material is very exquisite. The material in Eastwood Town is not that fine. I can guarantee that this material is definitely not from Eastwood Town. In the entire River County, it is impossible to find this material." "Are you sure?" Qin Wushuang asked in a low voice. "I'm 100% sure. I have followed the shopkeeper in this business for more than a dozen years. I still have a good eye for this. This material is exquisite. At least, only the aristocrats in the state city would pay such attention to it. Perhaps it is from the royal city." Qin Wushuang nodded and ignored the whispers of the assistant. Then he turned around and left swiftly. Most likely, this little clue that Big Brother Shi was holding his hand would be the only clue to find his sister. Now, he could not afford to waste any more time. If he wanted to investigate, he must get to the bottom of it as soon as possible. The longer he delayed, the more danger his sister would be in. When he returned to the Qin Manor, Shi Ming had already woken up. Apparently, he had already told Shi Hung and Qin Lianshan about the clothing. When he remembered that Qin Wushuang had asked about the clothing, he had already guessed most of it. When they saw him return, they all asked, "How did it go?" Qin Wushuang said, "Not from Eastwood Town." Shi Hung nodded, "Of course not. Besides your Qin family, who could hurt Ming Air in Eastwood Town?" "Father, Patriarch Shi, I've decided to go to South Cloud State City to investigate." "South Cloud State?" Qin Lianshan frowned. "Wushuang, are you suspecting the Shimen feudal lords? Before we have any clues, everyone is a suspect. Since the Shimen feudal lords and Big Brother Shi have an old history, they cannot escape suspicion. However, Father, please don't worry. I will never wrongly accuse any innocent person, and I will never let the murderer go unpunished." When he said here, Qin Wushuang's forehead was filled with black lines. He swore with an unfriendly tone, "No matter who did this, I promise that I will make him regret it for the rest of his life. I will not hesitate to pay 10 times the price." After he had finished speaking, he turned around and walked outside. When he walked out of the yard, the 3 teams that Qin Wushuang had trained were already in position. "All of you, Give me 120% of your attention and protect the Qin manor well. Remember, in half a month, the Qin family will no longer be a wealthy class, but a royal family. The 2,000 miles around the Great Song Mountains will be our territory. In our territory, how could we allow outsiders to behave atrociously? Yes. Qin Wushuang waved his hand and jumped onto the back of the horse. He quickly galloped out of the Qin manor and headed towards the main road. Inside the Shimen feudal lord's mansion, Shimenyu was also gathering all the elite warriors of the family and giving them a lecture. I will ask again, is the disappearance of the misty of the Eastwood Qin related to you guys? Patriarch, without your orders, how could we dare to act on our own? Yes, Patriarch, this matter definitely has nothing to do with us. That head guardian also opened his mouth. Patriarch, since your intentions are so clear, I think the elite warriors of the feudal lords would not be so brainless as to make an enemy out of the Eastwood Qin. Yes, I'm only afraid that some of you were instigated by Yin Heir and want to cause trouble. Since this matter has nothing to do with the Shimen feudal lords, then it's good. Everyone, wait and see. I heard that son of the Qin family has already returned to Eastwood Town. When he returns and learns about this matter, for sure, there will be a bloody storm. Everyone, just wait and see. Patriarch, in your opinion, who would do this? Suddenly, the head guardian asked. Shimenyu sighed. In recent years, in Prince Akaji's territory, I don't know how many young girls have gone missing. From my point of view, this matter is most likely a continuation of those missing girls' cases. Just as he was speaking, one of his trusted aides rushed into the hall in large strides and said, Patriarch, the son of the Qin family is outside asking to see you. Shimenyu's expression changed. Inwardly, he thought that things had come so quickly. He knew that after this matter had happened, the son of the Qin family would be the first to suspect the Shimen feudal lords. He would need to spend some time to explain this matter. Regardless of whether Shimenyu was willing to explain, he must explain if he did not want to get entangled in trouble. I will go and meet him. The Shimen feudal lords waved his hand and motioned everyone to control their emotions. They must not show any hostility. If the elite warriors of the family rushed out at this time, it would easily cause unnecessary misunderstandings. As he walked out of the door in large strides, Qin Wushuang was already somewhat impatient. Little brother Qin, let's talk in private. Shimenyu walked out of the door and led Qin Wushuang to the front. When they arrived at a secluded place, Shimenyu finally opened his mouth. I know that you will come to the Shimen feudal lords for sure. However, I only have one thing to say. Your sister's disappearance has nothing to do with the Shimen feudal lords. I am willing to guarantee it with my life. Oh, Qin Wushuang's expression was not friendly. Patriarch Shimen, are you trying to deceive me with your words? Of course not. I have already investigated. None of the elite warriors in the family who could hurt young Master Shiming had the time to commit the crime. And my son, Shimen Xian, is still reflecting on his mistakes. It is impossible for him to go to Eastwood Town and cause trouble. Okay, if that's the case, I would like to ask Patriarch Shimen to do me a favor. How about it? No need to be so polite, little brother Qin. Whatever it is, just say it. No discord, no concord. How can I help you? Okay, Patriarch Shimen is a straightforward person. I would like to ask Patriarch Shimen to immediately invite all the shopkeepers of the clothing stores in South Cloud State City to your mansion as guests. Do not miss a single one. Is it convenient for Patriarch Shimen? Shimenyu was stunned as he did not understand what Qin Wushuang was trying to do. However, he did not have the slightest intention to decline as he nodded. This is easy. Give me 2 hours. Before noon, I can bring everyone here. I promise not to miss a single one. Okay. Qin Wushuang nodded and said, then please do it quickly. Patriarch Shimen. Okay, Li Tian, I admit that I am old and senile. I did not expect that I would recognize the wrong chapter number in the previous chapter. I am sweating profusely. This time I was right. Chapter 115. The previous 2 chapters were 113 and 114. It's all my fault. I was possessed. I put a 0 in front and made the chapter wrong. Haha. Fortunately, the content was not wrong. I promise that I will not make such a mistake next time. Everyone looked down on me. Of course, it would be best if you look down on me with the monthly votes you have. Today's monthly votes are very reserved. Could it be that at this time, everyone has used up all their guaranteed monthly votes? Or is everyone still hiding it? To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 115. At the mansion of the Shi Min feudal lords, merchants from all the clothing stores and clothing shops in South Cloud State City had gathered together. 5 or 6 tables of various sizes filled the room. These merchants did not understand what Patriarch Shi Min was doing. However, no one dared to say a word. In the South Cloud State City, being able to receive an invitation from the Shi Min feudal lords was a blessing that had been accumulated for generations. After everyone had sat down, Shi Minyu walked out from the back hall happily. A young man with bright eyes followed next to him. Shi Minyu laughed. Bosses, this time, I've called you all here to introduce a young and promising man to everyone. He pointed at Qin Wushuang with a smile. This young Master Qin comes from Eastwood Town in River County of South Cloud State. I believe that those of you who are well-informed already know that this young Master Qin has an extraordinary social status. Most likely, in 10 days or half a month, he will become an offspring of the royal family. When these merchants heard Shi Minyu's introduction, they all exclaimed in a low voice. In these days, the name Qin Wushuang had become too famous. In just a few days, he had become a double champion in the martial arts student exam and a marquee title at a young age. He had already become a hot topic across the country. Unexpectedly, Patriarch Shi Min had invited everyone here to introduce such a young man to everyone. Then, those smart merchants immediately guessed. Could it be that since the Eastwood Qin family has become a royal family, the entire family's clothing needs to be changed? This is a great opportunity to customize clothing for the new royal family. It's definitely an honor. Each of these merchants thought quickly. They had already started to think about what special advantages they had in the circle of South Cloud State and how they could stand out in this huge competition. Shi Minyu observed everyone's expression and said with a smile, I have invited you all because of young Master Qin's request. Currently, young Master Qin has a troublesome matter and needs everyone's help. I wonder if you're interested in helping young Master Qin solve his problem? Those merchants all agreed. If young Master Qin has any orders, it would be our honor. How could we dare to decline? Please speak, young master. Ha! It would be our honor to serve the future offspring of the royal family. Patriarch Shi Min, thank you for being the bridge. No need to thank me. Shi Minyu still had a smile on his face. As long as you can help young Master Qin, that would be a great contribution. Please go ahead. The merchants all expressed their stance, patting their chests and promising that they would do their best. Qin Wushuang nodded and raised his wine cup. Wushuang is deeply moved by everyone's hospitality. Take this cup of wine as a token of my gratitude to everyone in advance. As soon as he raised his cup, the merchants didn't dare to be negligent and immediately said that they didn't dare. Cheers! Raising his head, Qin Wushuang downed a cup of wine. Those merchants hurriedly raised their heads and drank it. As soon as it entered their mouths, they felt great in their hearts. A future member of the royal family, toasting to them, was an opportunity that ordinary people would never be able to enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have a piece of cloth here that I would like you to examine. In our South Cloud State City, or in the various counties under the jurisdiction of South Cloud State, is there such a fashion? The merchants were stunned at first, but then they realized that the other party didn't want to customize clothes at all. However, they were still full of enthusiasm. Everyone wanted to be the first to appraise and show that they were the authoritative experts in this field. No need to rush. Let's go table by table. After looking, everyone can share their opinions. Shi Minyu maintained order. Since the Qin family matter had nothing to do with the Shi Min feudal lords, then he had to use this opportunity to get closer to Qin Wushuang. He was very glad that he made a wise choice at that time. He didn't become enemies with Qin Wushuang. Instead, he accepted Qin Wushuang's suggestion to make peace. If he was stubborn at that time and didn't cancel the engagement, then the Shimin feudal lords would be the unlucky ones. That piece of cloth was passed around. Those merchants appraised it once, and each of them had their own opinions. They argued until their faces turned red. Shimin pressed down his arm, indicating for everyone to quiet down. You all speak one by one. Don't argue. Boss Chiu, you go first. Shimin pointed at a merchant he was familiar with and let him speak first. That Boss Chiu stood up with his big belly and said respectfully, Lord, young Master Qin, this is a high-quality satin woven from silver silkworms. The workmanship is very delicate. Our South Cloud State, including South Cloud State City, isn't luxurious to this extent. It seems that Prince Lanyue produces this kind of silver silkworms. Silver silkworms produce silk, which is very suitable for making high-quality satin. It is said that this kind of satin is only shared by the royal family and the royal family. Nobles below the rank can't even buy it. Can you confirm that this is a satin made from silver silkworms? Qin Wushuang asked. That Boss Chiu didn't dare to make a 100% guarantee. We have been in this business for decades. Although there are some disputes, most of us feel that this should be silver silkworms. If young Master Qin wishes to confirm it, you can go to Redwood Royal City or even the imperial capital to ask the local silk merchants. Maybe you'll be more certain. He still couldn't give a definite answer, but Qin Wushuang wasn't disappointed. At least, South Cloud State's suspicion could be eliminated. It seemed that he still had to go to Redwood Royal City to inquire. Thinking about Redwood Royal City, Qin Wushuang suddenly thought of Tong Yao. Didn't Tong Yao say that if there was anything useful, he could just say it? It just so happened that Tong Yao's family's information network was very strong. Maybe he could ask her to get him a set of silver silkworms to compare. Thinking of this, he had an idea. After toasting a few more cups of wine and expressing his thanks, the banquet was over. After the banquet was over, Qin Wushuang said his goodbyes and left South Cloud State. Seeing that Qin Wushuang had left, Shimin finally let out a sigh of relief. He could clearly feel that Qin Wushuang's body was accumulating a terrifying resentment. Once this resentment was unleashed, the enemy would be in for a bad time. Luckily, his enemy wasn't the Shimin feudal lords. That was enough. No matter who it was, the Shimin feudal lords only needed to watch the show. They definitely couldn't get involved. In less than 10 days, Qin Wushuang once again came to Redwood Royal City. With Tong Yao's reminder, he was much more careful this time. He didn't show off at all and didn't reveal his identity. He wasn't afraid of the Redwood King, but he didn't want to cause more trouble at this time and cause more trouble. You, Redwood King, can't stand my exam results being lower than your son's, but do you think that I, Qin Wushuang, need to give you face? This wasn't Qin Wushuang's style at all. I don't care if you're a royal family or a feudal lord. In short, don't provoke me. He came to the remote place that Tong Yao led him to last time. After waiting for a while, Tong Yao really came. Seeing Qin Wushuang, she asked with concern, How is it? Did you find any clues? I have a clue, and I need Miss Tong's help. Qin Wushuang didn't act pretentious and handed over half of the cloth. This piece of cloth, can Miss Tong check if it's made of silver silkworms from Prince Lanyue? Silver silkworm silk? Tong Yao was slightly surprised. What's wrong? Silver silkworm silk is a luxury item that only the royal and the royal family can enjoy. Why are you checking this? Only the royal and the royal family have the right to enjoy it. To be exact, only people from the royal and the royal family have the right to enjoy it. Tong Yao corrected him seriously. This way, in the Bayou country, only the people next to Emperor He and the 4 royal families have the right to enjoy it. Do their elite warriors have the right? Yes. In the royal and the royal family, the elite warriors have a much higher status than ordinary children born from concubines. Of course, they have the right. Qin Wushuang's face sank slightly, and his thoughts became complicated. Royal family, royal family. In the Bayou country, it's almost impossible for ordinary people to pretend to be members of the royal family. However, It's easy to use a piece of clothing to pretend to be someone else's identity. Could that piece of cloth be a diversion tactic? To make me think in the wrong direction? With this consideration, Qin Wushuang decided to be more careful when dealing with this matter. Before he had a clear idea of the situation, he must control his emotions. Everything was unpredictable. Although he must be on guard against the diversion tactic, he could not eliminate the royal and the royal family as suspects. Right and wrong, true and false. Only when he saw it with his own eyes would it be the most real. He decided to pay a visit to the Redwood Mansion. He remembered that in recent years, Prince Akagi kept on disappearing young girls. And as the highest leader of the Prince Akagi, the Redwood King should not be doing nothing. Just this point alone, the Redwood Mansion could not be completely eliminated as a suspect. Deep into the night, Qin Wushuang changed into a set of martial arts clothes and put on the genuine leather mask provided by Tong Yao. Apparently, Qin Wushuang had changed his identity. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. This was a good night for scouting. After a moment of stealth, Qin Wushuang arrived at the end of the street next to the mansion. He flashed and hid in a dark corner. After all, the Redwood Mansion was Prince Akagi's most powerful existence. Of course, the defense inside was not ordinary. Although he did not have to worry about being captured if he rushed in, he still had to be on guard against the powerful warriors in the mansion. Even the Shi Min feudal lords had level 9 warriors of the genuine force. The Redwood Mansion must have a lot of level 9 warriors of the genuine force. At least, there must be more than one. While he was observing, he suddenly sensed a few black shadows rushing towards him from the west side of the street. They kept bouncing and jumping. After a few leaps, they arrived at the corner of the backyard of the mansion. The leader pinched his lips and imitated Nightingale's call. A moment later, the same response came from inside. Then, the 4 figures jumped over the wall and disappeared into the courtyard in a flash. Qin Wushuang seized this opportunity. His body was as light as a swallow. He jumped over the wall and looked inside. Then, he also jumped into the courtyard. He followed the few figures. Under a big willow tree in the backyard, a young man stood there like a ghost. 4 black-clothed men served him on his left and right. The young man asked softly, "Is everything done?" "Second young master, everything is done." There were a total of 67 old men and women who went to the imperial capital. All of them returned empty-handed. "We have already killed them halfway. The corpses have also been disposed of cleanly, leaving no trace behind." "Good, well done," the young master said gloomily. "As usual, no one is allowed to leak any information. Otherwise, their heads will be forfeit." "Yes. All right, you can leave now. Remember to go out the same way. Don't be discovered." The young master waved his hand. The 4 men in black nodded and turned around to leave. They had only taken a few steps when a young man's eyes suddenly flashed with a strange light. He raised the folding fan in his hand. Then, whoosh! 4 ribs of the fan shot out like sharp arrows and poisonous snakes. They directly pierced into the backs of the 4 men. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 116. Silencing a Witness. When a young master ordered them to retreat, Qin Wushuang also had the same thought in his mind. Just as the thought flashed through his mind, it happened as he expected. This young master looked weak, and his face had a sickly pale complexion. When he spoke, his voice was gloomy. Who would have thought that when he attacked, he would be so ruthless, silently killing the person who had worked for him for so long? Qin Wushuang's ears suddenly twitched. He found that one of the 4 black-clothed men's palms moved slightly. He didn't die. The young master was obviously very cautious. After the attack, he quickly approached. Out of nowhere, a packet of medicinal powder appeared in his hand. Just as he was about to pour it on the black-clothed man who didn't die, the black-clothed man's body suddenly shot forward like an arrow. His speed was so fast that he didn't seem to be injured at all. The young master obviously didn't expect such a change. He shouted in a low voice, "Stay." The black-clothed man laughed bitterly. "He Yufei, you're lucky. I've worked for you for 20 years. In the end, I'm going to be silenced. Stay in your dreams." While speaking, he didn't slow down at all and rushed to the top of the wall. The young master swung his sleeves. Shio, shio, shio. Another 3 arrows flew out and went straight for the black-clothed man's neck. He guessed that the black-clothed man was already prepared and was wearing some kind of soft armor. Therefore, this attack went straight for the exposed part of his body and didn't hit his back at all. Obviously, there was a hidden mechanism in the sleeve. The speed of the arrow was much faster than the black-clothed man's speed. It was launched later, but arrived first. At this moment, the stone that Qin Wushuang held tightly between his fingers suddenly shot out. Ding, ding, ding. 3 crisp sounds of collision. The 3 arrows were completely shot down without any suspense. Qin Wushuang was like a yiksha exploring the sea, stabbing out diagonally like lightning. His finger jabbed continuously, knocking the black-clothed man down. Taking advantage of the momentum, he rushed to the top of the wall. Carrying it on his shoulder, his body became as light as a swallow, and like a flash of lightning in the dark night, he disappeared. That second young master, He Yufei, didn't even have time to react before he lost sight of Qin Wushuang. At first, he was stunned. Then, he realized that something was amiss. Even if he wanted to give chase with his skills, definitely wouldn't be able to catch up. She stomped her feet in exasperation and stabbed each of the 3 men in black. Then, she turned around and walked into the inner courtyard of the prince's mansion. This matter must be reported to Imperial Father as soon as possible. At this moment, the Redwood King was having S*X with a concubine in the courtyard. He was in high spirits when he heard his subordinates say that the second young master wanted to see him. He couldn't help but feel angry. However, he still pushed the octopus-like concubine away, rolled up a set of clothes, and walked towards the outer hall. Yufei's expression was somewhat anxious as he paced back and forth, his brows filled with worry. Seeing his imperial father striding over, he hurriedly went up to greet him. "Fei, what's the matter? Why are you so flustered?" "Father, the 4 men I sent came back today to report. I followed your instructions and killed them to silence them. However, I didn't expect that one of them was very cunning. He was wearing some sort of soft armor on his body. My attack didn't hit him. Who would have thought that someone would suddenly appear out of nowhere and kidnap that person?" Taken away, the Redwood King was also secretly shocked. "Who was it? Did you see clearly?" "That person moved as fast as lightning, appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye, disappearing and disappearing into the darkness. However, I didn't see clearly who it was. That person's expression was very stiff and expressionless. He was wearing a black suit, so it was difficult to see his age and appearance." The Redwood King knew that his second son had always been careful in his actions. He had always been the one that he focused on training as his successor. Although he was young, he was the most shrewd and ruthless among his 3 sons. If even he had to suffer a loss, then the opponent's strength was most likely not to be underestimated. According to his description, that person's figure was extremely fast like lightning. He could easily take someone away under his nose. He was at least at level 8 of the genuine martial realm. It was very possible that he was at level 9 of the genuine martial realm. After all, the Redwood King was a formidable person. He didn't panic. After pondering for a moment, he came up with an idea, passed down the order. All level 8 genuine martial realm experts in the family. Gather in 15 minutes. Declare martial law and search for the assassin. Assassin? Yufei was surprised. Then he was very impressed. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. His father had already formulated the best solution in an instant. Only by using the word assassin could the Redwood Royal City be justified in declaring martial law and searching for the assassin. Moreover, they didn't have to worry about their reputation being damaged. Under the Redwood King's order, the 4 level 9 genuine martial realm experts and 11 level 8 genuine martial realm experts in the royal mansion all gathered in place. "Everyone, this is an emergency. Please forgive me for summoning you in the middle of the night. Fei, will explain the details to everyone." I only have one request. You must capture the assassin who broke into the royal mansion. He Yufei said, the assassin broke in from a backyard, killed 3 of my personal guards, and took away another person. His strength is outstanding. He is at least level 8 genuine martial realm, or even level 9. I would like to ask the 4 level 9 elders to lead a team and divide them into 4 teams. They will search in the north, south, east, and west directions. 3 of the 11 level 8 elders will be left to patrol the royal mansion. The other 8 will be divided into 2 groups and follow the level 9 elders to capture the assassin. The Redwood King nodded with satisfaction. Let's do as Fayer said. If you need any manpower, just send them. During the search, if you encounter any obstructions and refuse to cooperate, kill without mercy. At this moment, the Redwood King was displaying the domineering aura of a formidable person. His eyes were filled with murderous intent, and he didn't hide his anger at all. Let's go. Following the Redwood King's roar, the 4 search teams were assigned in an orderly manner. They all gathered their men and immediately started to move. He Yufei saw the Redwood King's pale face and felt deeply uneasy. He bowed and said, Father, this is all due to my negligence. Please punish me, or else I won't feel at ease. The Redwood King waved his hand. Fayer, I am not senile. You were indeed negligent in this matter, but it was also unexpected. If it wasn't for a third party, your subordinate wouldn't have been able to escape your second attack. Therefore, the main responsibility for this matter is not on you. Father, according to your speculation, who is the culprit? He Yufei asked carefully. The Redwood King's expression gradually eased. He said in a low voice, Before we have any clues, speculating will only increase our worries. With the abilities of the 4 level 9 elders, I believe that they will be able to capture the culprit and bring him to justice. When the time comes, the truth will be revealed. The corner of He Yufei's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. The Redwood King suddenly asked, Fayer, in all these years, how many virgins have we found in the Redwood King's territory, who were born on the 5th day of the 5th month of the 5th lunar 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 month of the 6th lunar month of the 5th lunar month of the 6th lunar month of the 5th lunar month of the 6th 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 lunar month of the 6th. How far are we from the number of 360? Father, in all these years, we have collected a total of 268 virgins. We are still a little short of the number of 360. In another 3 or 4 years, we might be able to gather enough. Another 3 or 4 years. The Redwood King muttered to himself and kept knocking on the table with the tip of his finger. 3 or 4 years is not a long time. Tell your eldest brother to be patient and wait a little longer. After all, he is already a disciple of Old Man Jiyin. Sooner or later, he will enter the upper sky realm. Okay, I will take care of it. He Yufei nodded and promised. Then he paused and asked again, Father, in this Sobbing Sky Mountain exam, third brother had unexpectedly lost the championship. Father, do you think there are some hidden secrets behind this matter? Hidden secrets? Fayer, what secrets do you think there are? After a moment of thinking, He Yufei gathered his courage and said, Could it be that the royal family is deliberately suppressing us because they don't want us to be in the limelight? The limelight of the royal territory has overshadowed the imperial capital? The Redwood King smiled coldly and shook his head. Royal family? Before the Zhanwu holy place, the emperor does not have much right to speak. I heard that this time, in the imperial capital, a martial arts student had slapped the face of the emperor's uncle. He had destroyed the signboard given by senior concubine Xian. This matter had indirectly slapped senior concubine Xian's face. However, the emperor did not say anything. Why is that so? It's because that martial arts student was protected by the Zhenwu holy place. When the great honored warrior went out, that emperor's uncle was so scared that his face turned ashen. He did not even dare to let out a fart and shut down his business. Ha, Fairer, do you think the emperor is being too careful with the Zhenwu holy place? Father, I am more curious. Who is that martial arts student protected by the Zhenwu holy place? The Redwood King's face turned cold as he said with a cold tone. Who else could it be? Qin Wushuang? It's that kid. The Redwood King's expression became somewhat ferocious. I don't know where this devilish kid came from. He got 600 points by himself. I can't help but wonder if the Zhenwu holy place had deliberately let him win to suppress the limelight of the four royal families. The Zhenwu holy place had suppressed him? There is no grudge between the four royal families and the Zhenwu holy place. Why would they suppress us? He Yufei could not understand. The Redwood King kept sneering and did not answer. Instead, he said with a strange tone, Qin Wushuang, the Eastwood Qin is only an up-and-coming wealthy class offspring. How could he have such outstanding strength? Father, do you want to send someone to investigate this brat? As he Yufei spoke, he suddenly said again, speaking of the Eastwood Qin, this time, one of the kidnapped girls is the daughter of the Eastwood Qin family. Father, should we interrogate her? Oh, the Redwood King's eyes lit up. Where is she being held? The same place, the Galloping Horse Ranch in the eastern suburbs. The Redwood King stood up and said, Good. Tomorrow morning, go and prepare. Lock her up in a room alone. I will personally interrogate her. Yes. Under the dim light of the night, Qin Wushuang carried a person and did not stop. In a moment, he arrived at Tong Yao's secret hideout. He threw that person to the ground and was not in a hurry to unseal his acupoints. Instead, he sized that man in black up with a murderous look in between his brows. This was a psychological intimidation. To make him speak, he must first destroy his psychological defense. Then, he could answer every question and tell him everything he knew. P.S. I will continue to update tonight. Today, I did not get any monthly votes. It seems that the saying is true. The crying child gets the milk. Haha, I need to cry a few times and look like I'm waiting to be fed. Yeah, I can't get rid of my opponent with the monthly votes. I feel somewhat anxious. The situation is special. Maybe one night, I will be raped by my opponent. Warriors of the Galaxy, please help me. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 117. Under Qin Wushuang's gaze, that man in black also felt his scalp go numb. His entire body felt cold as if he had fallen into an ice cave. I saved your life, right? Qin Wushuang finally opened his mouth and asked with an indifferent tone. That man in black could only blink his eyes to express his agreement since all his meridians had been sealed. I saved your life, and I can take it away at any time. Now, it's up to you to save your own life. After he had finished speaking, he poked a few times with the congealed finger and unsealed all his meridians. That man in black's eyes flickered and said with an ashen face, What do you want me to do? It's simple. You will answer whatever I ask. This is your only chance to save yourself. Qin Wushuang's tone was not heavy, but it was as cold as a knife and did not seem to carry the slightest hint of a human. Remember, I don't want to hear half a lie. If you don't want to play with your life, then don't risk it with lies. Understand? Yes, yes. That man in black did not doubt that this person before him had the ability to take his life at any time. Okay, first question. Is the disappearance of Prince Akaji related to the Redwood King's mansion? Yes, it's an order from the Redwood King. He Yufei is in charge of it. That man in black answered straightforwardly and without hesitation. Indeed, anger shot out from Qin Wushuang's eyes. Stealing from his own people. How could such a bastard deserve to be a king when he harmed his own people? Second question, recently, did you guys go to Eastwood Town in River County and kidnap a girl named Qin Xiao? Mister, we are only He Yufei's henchmen. He Yucheng's trusted butler is in charge of the kidnapping. We have no right to ask. Qin Wushuang stared at him. How do you find those, butler? Question mark. We all have our own jobs and never cross paths. I don't know how to find those, butler. For this question, I am afraid only he Yufei can answer. The anger in Qin Wushuang's heart grew as he shouted in a low voice. You don't know this, and you don't know that. You've already lost half your life. Then let me ask you, why did they kidnap so many girls? What is their purpose? Was it for the Redwood King's pleasure? Were they being held? The Redwood King was an ambitious and ruthless person, but he didn't seem to have such a perverted interest in women. It seemed that he had another purpose for capturing so many girls. As for the exact location, this lowly one has no way of knowing. However, according to my daily conversations with my fellow cultivator, he should not be locked up in the Redwood Mansion. Qin Wushuang was deep in thought. It seemed that capturing such a small fry today could only confirm whether or not those missing persons cases were related to the Redwood Mansion. It would be difficult to get more clues. However, being able to confirm that it was related to the Redwood Mansion was already enough. The other clues were insignificant. As long as it was confirmed, Qin Wushuang would have a way. Just as Zhang Xian was about to speak, a figure suddenly flashed through the door. It was Tong Yao. Young Master Qin, we need to move. Almost all of the powerful warriors of the Redwood Mansion had been mobilized. They were divided into 4 teams and were searching in the east, south, west, and north directions. This place will not be safe sooner or later. Qin Wushuang nodded. Very well, Miss Tong, you should leave quickly. This place will not be unsafe because I have no intention of staying here. Tong Yao was surprised. Where is young Master Qin going? I'm going back to where I came from. Qin Wushuang's tone was cold, and his eyes flashed with a strong, murderous intent. You want to go to the Redwood Mansion again? Tong Yao asked in disbelief. Didn't Miss Tong say that all the powerful warriors of the Redwood Mansion were out searching? Since their lair is empty, if I visit them now, I will definitely give the Redwood King a surprise. On Qin Wushuang's young face, there was a rare trace of evilness. It was obvious that the anger and hatred in his heart had burned to the extreme. As a member of the royal family, the lord of a territory, instead of doing something for the people, he harmed them. Regardless of his former or current life, Qin Wushuang hated such bastards who brought disaster to the country and the people. The most important thing was that this time, the Redwood King actually made a move on his sister. Family was Qin Wushuang's most precious wealth in this life. Martial arts training, wealth, status, all of these could be obtained through hard work. But family was something that could not be replaced. If you have it, then you have it. If you lose it, then you lose it forever. It was impossible to give you the chance to regain what you lost. Young Master Qin, the Redwood King has many powerful warriors around him, and he himself is one of the few top warriors. The entire Redwood Mansion is full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Your second visit, I am afraid that they have already been waiting for you. Hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Qin Wushuang sneered and said with a disdainful tone, I think it is more like they are hiding evil. Even if the Redwood Mansion has a mountain of knives and a sea of flames and is my enemy, I will make sure that the mountain of knives collapses and the sea of flames flattens. Miss Tong, the mountain does not move, the water will move. Today, we will part ways. After he finished speaking, he carried the man in black, and with a few leaps, he disappeared into the darkness of the night. Looking at Qin Wushuang's figure disappearing into the darkness of the night, Tong Yao murmured, Sure enough, everything is going according to the worst plan. Those missing persons cases are really related to the Redwood Mansion. Young Master Qin, I hope you will be safe this time. Under Qin Wushuang's control, the man in black obediently told him how to get close to the mansion, how to take shortcuts, and how to avoid being noticed. Almost effortlessly, Qin Wushuang used his superior body movements and arrived at the backyard of the Redwood King's mansion with ease. According to the man in black, He Yufei's location was in a room in the southeast of the mansion. There was a group of men of sacrifice who were responsible for the protection of He Yufei. Even if something big happened in the mansion, their only duty was to protect the young master. Being carried by Qin Wushuang, The man in black realized that Qin Wushuang had returned to the mansion. He was so scared that he almost pissed his pants. However, his whole body was restrained, and he couldn't move at all. He could only suffer in silence and complain incessantly. The scale of the Redwood Mansion was indeed huge. If it wasn't for the guidance, Qin Wushuang wouldn't have been able to find He Yufei's location in the Redwood Mansion. After avoiding layers of checkpoints, open and hidden sentries, Qin Wushuang finally arrived at He Yufei's residence. After he hid his body behind a fake mountain, Qin Wushuang looked around and saw that there were about 6 qi fields hidden in 6 different directions. They formed a protective formation around He Yufei's residence. In other words, if he wanted to get close to He Yufei, he must first break through the protective circle of these 6 experts. From their breathing and control, Qin Wushuang estimated that the individual cultivation of these experts should be around the 7th level of the genuine martial realm. The 6 of them were scattered in 6 different positions. They must have been trained to attack together. Therefore, if he wanted to break through the protective circle of these 6 people, it was very likely that he wouldn't have to face a single attack from 6 7th level genuine martial realm warriors, but a group attack from a group. I must distract their attention, at least 1 or 2 of them, as long as I'm not surrounded by 6 people at the same time. Breaking in and directly restraining He Yufei would not be a problem. Once I'm held back by those 6 people, even if I don't have to worry about their group attack, I must be careful of being held back by them and attracting the real top experts of the mansion. If the 4 9th level elders appeared together, no matter how powerful Qin Wushuang was, he would still be in trouble. Thinking of this, Qin Wushuang suddenly had a very vicious plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Qin Wushuang lifted the man in black and unsealed his acupuncture point. He smiled and said, "I will let you go now. Whether you can escape with your life depends on your performance." After he finished speaking, he moved his fingers and actually unsealed the man in black's acupuncture point completely. With a shake of his arms, he directly threw the man in the direction of the 6 people. The man in black was scared out of his wits. He somersaulted twice in the air. His toes touched a railing, and he rushed out, complaining incessantly. This move was too ruthless. Sure enough, when the 6 experts guarding the 6 corners saw the man in black, 2 of them immediately flew out from the positions closest to him. 1 on the left and 1 on the right. They chased after him and shouted, "Stay!" What Qin Wushuang wanted was this split second of opportunity. The moment he saw the 2 figures fly out, he kicked his legs and somersaulted in the air, directly shooting towards the courtyard below. Qin Wushuang had been preparing for this attack for a long time. The direction, speed, and angle were all calculated and accurate. It was this split second of time. Sure enough, the gap between the 2 people was revealed. Qin Wushuang flashed in. The 4 experts in the other 4 corners roared and rushed out together, shouting, "Young master, be careful. There's an assassin." Qin Wushuang laughed strangely twice. His toes seemed besmeared with oil. His speed was as fast as a slippery fish. After a few shuttles, he slipped into the corridor. Looking around, he saw that the light in a room in the middle was extinguished. Immediately, he knew where He Yufei was. As it turned out, when He Yufei heard the warning from outside, he very vigilantly extinguished the oil lamp. The darkness could confuse the opponent and delay the enemy. But he didn't expect that the opponent's speed would be so fast that he didn't have any time to react. Almost at the same time that his subordinates sent out the warning, Qin Wushuang had already rushed in front of him. The wind from his palm was fierce. With 1 palm, he broke open the door and window. That He Yufei was about to jump out of the small window at the back, but Qin Wushuang shouted loudly, shaking the blood in his body. He only felt that his whole body suddenly lost strength. His legs went soft. Immediately, Qin Wushuang's 5 fingers grabbed He Yufei's neck. With a sinister smile, he grabbed He Yufei and jumped out of the door. "Those who block me die." With a loud shout, he drew a circle with 1 palm. The sun-flame Zhenshi was pushed out like a tidal wave. Like a volcanic eruption, it directly pushed the 2 guards who were rushing in the front more than 10 meters away. After a few loud bangs, all the tendons and veins in their body were broken. They could only breathe out, but not in. The other 4 guards saw the sudden change and were all shocked. Each of them blew a sharp whistle to warn the entire prince's mansion. Not long after, whistles echoed from all directions. Countless figures continuously flew over. Qin Wushuang laughed loudly. He wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he jumped to a high place and observed the terrain. He shouted loudly, "Redwood King, I'll borrow your son." After he finished speaking, he laughed loudly. The sound waves were accompanied by the supreme lion's roar. The sound waves continuously spread out. The experts were all shaken to the point that they were dizzy. Their blood was in turmoil, and they felt like vomiting. Today is very tiring, but it's also 3 chapters later. If nothing unexpected happens tomorrow, it should be 4 chapters later. Today's monthly votes are really a tragedy, and the pursuers behind are constantly waving their flags. It's very dangerous. In terms of actual combat ability, the Galaxy Warriors are not bad, but there are some subtle things that are not advantageous in battle. So, if you want to suppress the opponent and soar to the galaxy, you have to rely on the Galaxy Warriors breathing together. If everyone breathes together, not to mention soaring to the galaxy, it's only a matter of time before they rush out of the galaxy. In the end, I still have to make a wish. Now, the monthly votes are 277. Let's see if I can reach 300 votes by tomorrow morning. Maybe it's very difficult, but Li Tian is still willing to sleep with a good wish. Tomorrow, there will be 4 chapters. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 118. Qin Wushuang carried He Yufei in his hand and stood on the roof of the mansion with an arrogant expression. He was like a towering mountain, tall and proud, giving people a feeling that he stood out from the crowd. Whether it's in the open or in the dark, there's no need to hide. I only want the Redwood King to talk to me. Qin Wushuang said with a cold tone, as if he was not in the mansion, but on the street. And those warriors who were lying in ambush were like clay statues in his eyes. He had not even put them in his eyes. With He Yufei in his hands, he was not afraid that the Redwood King would not compromise. Although the Redwood King had fallen asleep again, he was obviously alerted at the first moment. He put on a brocade robe and rushed over with a few of his trusted subordinates. From afar, he saw a person floating on top of a high roof. He carried a person in his hand, like an eagle carrying a chick. He was arrogant and looked down on all the warriors in the mansion. "Who are you?" The Redwood King shouted in a low voice and leaped forward. But now that his son was in the hands of someone else, the Redwood King did not dare to act rashly. "You are the Redwood King?" Qin Wushuang opened his eyes wide and looked at the Redwood King in front of him. "I am. Who are you?" While the Redwood King was dealing with him, he secretly gestured to his subordinates to form a formation and stop this person. At the same time, he hinted his subordinates to inform the 4 level 9 elders. Qin Wushuang smiled indifferently and said, "Redwood King, if I were you, I would not put my hands behind my back and make gestures. First of all, this does not have the demeanor of a king. Second of all, you're pushing your son into the abyss of death." The Redwood King was an ambitious and ruthless person, but when he heard this, his heart could not help but tremble. Among his 3 sons, his eldest son was a disciple of an innate master since he was young, so he could not inherit his position in the secular world. His 3rd son was young and energetic, with an outstanding talent in martial arts, but his methods and shrewdness were not at the level of a king. And this 2nd son, at such a young age, was shrewd, wise, and resourceful. When it was time to be ruthless, 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 when it was time to be merciful, he would not be stingy in giving his subordinates benefits. Using kindness and power, he controlled his subordinates' way of a king. What was even rarer was that He Yufei's talent in martial arts cultivation was not weak either. With his potential, when he reached the Redwood King's age, catching up to his father's level would not be a problem. Therefore, the Redwood King's expectations for his eldest and third sons were more on the path of martial arts. He even hoped that they could go to the Martial Saint Mountain to take over. However, all these plans were originally going very smoothly. However, because of a dark horse that appeared out of nowhere, his deployment was completely disrupted. This was also the reason why the Redwood King was still brooding over the fact that Qin Wushuang ranked first in the trial. Of course, the Redwood King obviously did not know that the person in front of him was Qin Wushuang. Otherwise, who knew how complicated his feelings would be right now? It would be a lie if the Redwood King said he was not nervous. After all, their son was in the hands of the other party. His life and death were no longer in their hands. Redwood King. Qin Wushuang's voice once again sounded leisurely. I know you are stalling for time, waiting for your so-called 4-stage 9 elders to come back. However, don't you forget that your son's life is in my hands. This is a problem that even 100-stage 9 elders could not solve, ha. The Redwood King shivered inwardly. He could see it clearly. He could clearly see that this opponent was extremely terrifying. He obviously did not care about the experts of the Redwood King's mansion and did not even put them in his eyes. An opponent who could talk and laugh freely in the Redwood King's mansion was definitely not an idiot. He must be someone with real abilities. Moreover, the other party had fey air under his control, which meant that he had a trump card in his hand. Mister, if you think that you can threaten me and bargain with my son, then you are wrong. The Redwood King was worried in his heart, but on the surface, his tone was still unyielding. Is that so? I heard that even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. I would like to see how the Redwood King's mood would be if I killed your son with one palm strike. The Redwood King's face was as cold as ice, and he said coldly, if that is the case, I can guarantee that you will die without a complete corpse. Qin Wushuang looked up to the sky and laughed, as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world. After the laughter stopped, Qin Wushuang said indifferently, Redwood King, if I want to kill someone, you will not be able to stop me with just a few threats. The Redwood King asked coldly, what are your intentions? Why don't you tell me for reference? Good, now you are a straightforward person. Qin Wushuang said softly, I only want to ask you, Prince Akaji, the case of the missing girls, was it you, the Redwood King? A man of character dares to take responsibility for his actions. Redwood King, let's see how you answer. The Redwood King's expression did not change. That's right, it was me who did it. His tone was relaxed, as if everything was natural. They are the people of my Redwood royal territory. Their lives and deaths are all controlled by me, the Redwood King. Capturing a few people, is it not the same as catching a few dogs? What is there to be surprised about? Qin Wushuang's expression turned cold. Capturing a few people like capturing a few dogs? Does this mean that my sister is also a dog? When he thought of this, he became furious. He lifted He Yufei up and squeezed his 5 fingers, causing He Yufei's whole body to twitch. Both of his hands were powerless as he struggled. Qin Wushuang laughed crazily. Redwood King, your son is now my captive. Killing him is also as easy as killing a dog. Dare I ask, how are you feeling right now? The Redwood King was furious. Seeing his son in such a sorry state, with his tongue being squeezed out, if he continued to squeeze him like this, he would probably suffocate to death in a moment. Stop! The Redwood King roared like a mad tiger. His eyes emitted a strong, murderous intent. It was obvious that he hated Qin Wushuang to the extreme. Qin Wushuang turned a deaf ear to him and slapped He Yufei's face with his left hand. He sneered, stop. Redwood King, you also feel sorry for him? Your son's life is a life, but other people's children are not. This is called giving you a taste of your own medicine. You can't understand the pain of other people losing their children, so I will let you experience it yourself. As he spoke, he slapped He Yufei's face more than a dozen times. He Yufei's white face immediately became swollen like a pig's head. The Redwood King's whole body was trembling uncontrollably. With each slap, his heart was bleeding. Slapping his son's body was painful to the Redwood King's heart. Qin Wushuang laughed loudly. He knew that he had completely gained the upper hand. He had firmly suppressed the Redwood King's arrogance. He stopped slapping and asked with satisfaction, "Redwood King, how does it feel?" The Redwood King's eyes were shooting out sparks of anger. "Tell me, what you want? Release them. Release all the girls you've captured. This is the only way for you to save yourself. Otherwise, you can just wait to collect your son's corpse." "Impossible." The Redwood King refused immediately. "The girls that I captured were all sent to other places. I don't know if they're dead or alive. They are all gone. How can I release them?" "They are all gone?" Qin Wushuang's face became even colder. He tightened his 5 fingers again and said coldly, "Redwood King, I don't want to waste my breath. If you still don't agree to release them in the next moment, I will tear off one of your son's arms. I will ask you one more time. If you still don't release them, then your son will have no arms for the rest of his life. Release or not?" Qin Wushuang glared at the Redwood King with his eyes wide open. He was like a King Kong descending to the mortal world. His power was threatening. Since when did the Redwood King have his hands and feet tied like this? His eyes were bloodshot. He angrily squeezed out a word from between his teeth. "Release. But only release the people you need." The Redwood King said word by word. "Impossible. These girls are related to you, right? It seems that you don't really want your son's arm." Qin Wushuang finished speaking and was about to use his strength. The Redwood King shouted, "Wait. Have you thought it through?" The Redwood King clenched his teeth and said with a ferocious face, "I will tell you the truth. Only a group of girls that I caught recently are still here. The others have been sent to a faraway place. It's almost impossible for them to survive. Even if you want me to release them, I can't release them." "How many were there recently? Do you have a list?" Qin Wushuang could already tell that the Redwood King's last words were the truth. What he cared about the most now was his sister. As for those who had been missing for many years, he was also powerless to save them. "I don't have a list, but I can bring them all for you to see." A trace of viciousness flashed in the Redwood King's eyes. Although it was just a flash, Qin Wushuang completely saw through it. Qin Wushuang thought for a moment and said, "All right." At the same time, he said, "Then let's set the deadline at half a month. After half a month, if those girls return safely, your son will return to your side safely and inherit your throne. If one of them is missing, then you have no choice but to choose another heir." "Huh. Tomorrow morning, I will wait at the east gate of the Redwood Royal City. If I don't release them, the agreement is canceled." The Redwood King suppressed his anger and said, "Why should I release them first and not at the same time? The reason is simple. You caught them first, so naturally you release them first. If you release them at the same time, wouldn't you be the one who takes the lead? Why deal with people? I never suffer losses. And tonight, I will have to trouble your son to come with me." After Qin Wushuang had finished speaking, he carried He Yufei on his shoulder. Then he kicked with both feet and flew towards the outside. He continued to chant, "If you don't want me to kill people immediately, then get out of my way obediently." Accompanied by this aura, Qin Wushuang came and went like the wind. His figure was as fast as lightning. After a few rounds, he disappeared into the night sky. The Redwood King was dumbstruck. It was as if his soul had been hollowed out. Obviously, he had realized that this person's skills were not inferior to anyone in the Redwood Mansion. Especially the speed of his movements. It was as fast as a ghost. In terms of speed and strangeness, he was better than any level 9 genuine Force Realm warrior in the Redwood Mansion. If such a person really wanted to kill Fei Air and leave calmly, he could do it. Thinking of this, the Redwood King was furious. He punched out, and the fake mountain in front of him collapsed. Stone fragments flew everywhere, and gray fog filled the air. The subordinates of the Redwood King kept quiet out of fear. No one dared to make a sound, for fear of angering the Redwood King. P.S. Qin Wushuang is angry. So is Li Tian. Who would have thought that the monthly votes would not only not be pulled apart, but also be pulled closer? Today is the 4th chapter. If the monthly votes are ideal and can get rid of the opponent, Li Tian will do his best to reach the 5th chapter, Warriors of the Galaxy, charge. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 119. 7 in the morning, at the east gate of the Redwood Royal City. A few carriages were traveling on the official road outside of Eastgate City. The Redwood King brought 4 Phase 9 elders and all of the Phase 8 elders. They were like dragons, and their horses were like tigers. They were all gathered outside of the East Gate. All the merchants and passers-by were prohibited from using the official road. Outside of the East Gate, everything was under martial law. The Redwood King had his own reasons for doing this. He did not want the outside world to know that the case of the missing girls was caused by the Redwood King. Although he was the lord of a territory and his words were overbearing, he still had to consider his reputation. Qin Wushuang smiled calmly. 1 man and 1 horse slowly walked out from the side of the road. From afar, he saw the angry Redwood King and his subordinates who wanted to eat him alive. He did not care at all. He said softly, "Redwood King, you are indeed a man of your words. Let them go." The Redwood King saw that his son was tied up on the back of the horse, and his life was uncertain. He was furious. "Let Fei Er talk to me." Qin Wushuang patted him. "Sure." He Yufei raised his head weakly. "Father." The Redwood King felt a pain in his heart and shouted, "Let them go." With the order, the girls on the horses were pushed out one by one. There were 7 or 8 girls in total. Qin Wushuang glanced at them and saw that his sister was among them. Her face was pale, but her eyes were filled with unyielding anger. The Redwood King was also very cunning. He purposely drove everyone out to see who Qin Wushuang would greet. From there, he would be able to find out who they were. Once his son was out of danger, the Redwood King's revenge would come like a storm. The Redwood King's anger had reached the point where even the water of 3 rivers and 5 lakes would not be able to wash it away. Qin Wushuang only sneered and did not say anything. "Give each of them a horse, a bag of food, and 100 taels of silver." The Redwood King waved his hand. Everything was prepared and sent over. "Sir, I have already made concessions. Now is the time for you to speak, right?" Qin Wushuang smiled and nodded. "If everything goes well, in half a month, you will be able to reunite with your son. If something goes wrong..." The Redwood King's face twitched slightly as he said, "All right, I will wait for you for half a month. If Fei doesn't come back in half a month, just you wait. This king doesn't care which noble family you belong to, Prince Akaji. This king swears that I will destroy your family and kill all 9 generations of your family." Qin Wushuang shrugged with a calm expression. "I'll wait." He then shouted, "Ladies, the one who captured you was the Redwood King, and the one who let you go was also the Redwood King. Remember, freedom is hard to come by. If you want to live to see your parents, leave now." Those girls were flustered. Although most of them did not know how to ride a horse, they still hurriedly climbed up and hurriedly left. Qin Xiu cast a puzzled glance at Qin Wushuang, but she didn't linger and rushed toward the main road. As she listened, she felt that this person's accent was somewhat familiar, but the other party had obviously deliberately changed his voice. Qin Xiu's intuition told her that this person was her younger brother, Qin Wushuang. However, under this situation, Qin Xiu knew that it would be inappropriate to recognize him. Or else, if the Redwood King knew her brother's true identity, there would be no end of trouble. The 2 parties remained in a stalemate until the afternoon. Qin Wushuang estimated that those girls had already gone far. Then he laughed. "Redwood King, there is no need for you to send me off. You'd better pray that nothing goes wrong during this half a month. Or else." After he had finished speaking, he turned around and urged the horse to leave. With an ashen face, the Redwood King waved his hand to stop those elite family warriors who wanted to chase after him. "Your Highness, did you see?" The muscles on the Redwood King's face could not help but tremble. "That pretty girl in blue, where did she come from?" "Your Highness, according to the list, she came from River County." "River County?" The Redwood King's face turned cold as he asked, "What's her surname?" "Qin." "Qin?" Suddenly, the Redwood King was stunned. His expression became complicated as he mumbled, Qin? Eastwood Qin? Could it be him? Qin Wushuang? At this moment, those family elders also realized. The Redwood King waved his horse whip fiercely and shouted, Investigate! Investigate thoroughly! Eastwood Qin, if I don't destroy your family, I swear I am not a man. Reporting, Your Highness, there's news from South Cloud State City. That Qin Wushuang had been a guest at the Shi Min feudal lord's mansion. He had invited all the shopkeepers of the clothing shops in South Cloud State to appraise a piece of cloth, reporting, Your Highness, news from the third young master of the imperial capital. That Qin Wushuang did not go with them to meet with the martial saint. He had already left the imperial capital. Your Highness, all kinds of news kept coming in, and all kinds of clues pointed in the same direction. Most likely, the enemy was that Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang. This was a name that the Redwood King could not let go of. His third son, He Yucheng, was supposed to take first place in the trial, but in the end, a dark horse from the dark sky stole his crown. This was an old grudge. His eldest son was going to collect 360 virgins born on the 5th day of the 5th lunar month 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 of the 5th lunar month. This was a new grudge. Before the old hatred could be resolved, a new enmity had been added. If he had a choice, the Redwood King only had one thought: to make the Eastwood Qin disappear completely. Of course, this matter involved a lot of people, especially since Qin Wushuang had stood out in this exam. She had become the most beloved daughter of the martial Saint Mountain and a super popular person in the entire Bayou country. If he wanted to deal with him, it would be inconvenient to kill him directly. While he was deep in thought, one of his trusted aides quickly walked in. Your Highness, an imperial edict has arrived. Imperial edict? The Redwood King was startled. Why was there an imperial edict at this time? The Redwood King and the current emperor were brothers of the same clan. His ancestors had conferred the title of Prince Akaji. Although he was not the brother of the current emperor, they were still brothers of the same clan. On the surface, they were brothers of the same clan. However, the etiquette between a ruler and an official could not be ignored. Since the imperial edict had arrived, the Redwood King did not dare to neglect it. He immediately tidied up his clothes and went out to welcome it. After some small talk, that eunuch who had announced the imperial edict smiled. Your Highness, listen to the imperial edict. The Redwood King led all his disciples and subordinates to kneel down to receive the imperial edict. By the will of the heavens, the emperor's imperial edict says. That eunuch started to read the imperial edict with a sharp voice. Initially, the Redwood King was respectful and did not speak a word. The more he listened, the more he felt something was wrong. In the imperial edict, the emperor had praised this martial arts student exam in a high-profile manner. Then, he changed the topic and praised the winner of the martial arts student exam. At the same time, he also mentioned the rewards. That was not all. However, what truly made the Redwood King furious was the content that came after. It turned out that most of the land awarded to the new king would come from Prince Akaji. South Cloud State, as well as the neighboring Greentree State, both of the territories of these two states would be taken from his Redwood royal territory. Of course, the royal family would also compensate the Redwood King with the land they owned. If the eunuch who had announced the imperial edict was not here, most likely the Redwood King would have cursed on the spot. After that eunuch had finished reading the imperial edict, he said with a smile, Your Highness, this is what the emperor meant. Please accept the imperial edict. Inwardly, the Redwood King was furious. However, he did not dare to neglect his etiquette. Long live the emperor! Long live the emperor! These three words of long live the emperor were said with gritted teeth. In fact, he had cursed the current emperor more than 100 times. That eunuch knew that the Redwood King was furious to the extreme. Of course, he did not dare to stay any longer. He carefully smiled and said, "Your Highness, I have finished my task. I will return to the imperial capital to report. I will not see you off." The Redwood King said lightly. As soon as that eunuch had stepped out of the door, the Redwood King smashed his fist on the chair. Ka ka ka. Instantly, that chair shattered into pieces. Qin Wushuang, it's Qin Wushuang again. The Redwood King laughed out of extreme anger. Inwardly, the anger had reached its peak. He knew that this imperial edict might not have been the emperor's intention. However, it must have come from the Martial Saint Mountain. In other words, the Martial Saint Mountain's intention was clear. They wanted to praise the champion of this martial arts student exam. This martial arts student exam was organized by the mother country. It had a profound meaning. The Redwood King asked himself, with the current situation, even if he was the king of a territory, it would not be convenient for him to deal with Qin Wushuang. However, the old worries and new hatred had piled up. Now, he had to give him his own territory. This was not something the Redwood King could accept calmly. "Your Highness, I do have a plan." The one who spoke was the head elder, the head of the stage 9 elders in the family. "Head elder, what's the plan?" The Redwood King immediately asked. "Your Highness, these virgins were needed by Old Man Ji-in to practice his upper sky evil technique. For this matter, it's not convenient for me, Prince Akaji, to deal with the Qin. And the one who had destroyed Old Man Ji-in's practice was a disciple of the Qin. If we report this matter to the Ji-in Mountain in the Great Luo Empire, I believe that Old Man Ji-in would be furious, using someone else to do the dirty work. I believe that person from a Martial Saint Mountain would not be able to stop Old Man Ji-in." With a gloomy face, the Redwood King nodded slightly. Apparently, he agreed with the head elder's plan. With Old Man Ji-in's position in the Great Luo Empire, killing a disciple of a subordinate country was no different than killing a dog. The Great Luo Empire had dozens of subordinate countries. In the eyes of an elite warrior like Old Man Ji-in, a mere exam champion from a subordinate country was not worth mentioning. Even if he had killed him, the Great Luo Empire would most likely compromise after weighing the pros and cons. The royal family of the Great Luo Empire would not turn against Old Man Ji-in because of this little matter. This plan was very feasible, and if Old Man Ji-in was willing to make a move, even if he did not come out of the mountain, he could just send any elite disciple to raise the entire Qin family to the ground. When he thought here, the Redwood King's eyes were full of viciousness. This was the plan, to kill with a borrowed knife and kill several birds with one stone. Not only could he get rid of Qin Wushuang, this thorn in his side, he could also establish his third son, He Yucheng's position in the martial arts world. That one from a Martial Saint Mountain? Ha! Although he was an upper sky realm warrior, everyone knew that he was old and had reached the stage where he had to find a successor. P.S. Now, he is 73 votes ahead of the second place in the monthly votes. If by tonight, he can get rid of 100 votes. Today, he will definitely do his best to write the 5th chapter. I will never go back on my words. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 120. Recently, Tong Yao had been very busy because Qin Wushuang had entrusted her with a task. Qin Wushuang had given her a list of 18 things. There were 9 types of poisonous insects and 9 types of poisonous flowers. Qin Wushuang's request was for Tong Yao to prepare these things and send them to the Qin Manor within a week. Tong Yao looked at the list. These poisonous insects and flowers were not hard to find. With the Tong family's connections and methods, it would not take a week to collect these things. However, Qin Wushuang's request was that she must collect them separately and keep it a secret. It would be best if the Tong family was not involved. Tong Yao knew that Qin Wushuang always had a clear goal in mind. He must have his reasons for ordering her like this. She immediately agreed and collected these 18 types of poisonous objects for Qin Wushuang herself. After Qin Wushuang left the Redwood Royal City, he spurred his horse to catch up with Qin Xiu. When Qin Xiu saw her little brother rushing over, all the fear and worry in her heart had been thrown away. She was extremely excited. "Sister, it's all in the past. Tell me, that demon that has been bothering you all these years, is he the one who caught you this time?" Qin Xiu nodded and sobbed. "It's him. It's this demon. He threw Big Brother Shi into the cliff." "Sister, don't be sad. Big Brother Shi is blessed by the heavens. He fell off the cliff and got caught by a pine tree growing on the cliff. He did not die. He will recover after 10 days or half a month. Big Brother Shi is not dead." Qin Xiu was overjoyed. Her gloomy face was instantly swept away. "As your little brother, when have I ever lied to you?" Qin Xiu beamed with joy and pointed at He Yufei, who was riding on Qin Wushuang's horse. "Who is this person?" "Sister, this person is one of the masterminds of the demon you mentioned. He is the second son of the Redwood King, He Yufei." "Redwood King?" Qin Xiu opened her eyes wide. "That's him. As the king of a territory, he dares to harm his own people. He caught so many girls, but I don't know what he wants to do." Qin Wushuang shook his head. "I can't figure it out either, but according to my speculation, it shouldn't be a good thing." In his previous life, Qin Wushuang had also heard of some evil sect masters who practiced evil martial arts. They practiced some kind of plucking yin to replenish yang technique, which was despicable and shameless. It could be said that they were hated by everyone. "Then what do you plan to do with this person?" This is called hoarding a rare commodity. I heard that the Redwood King has been hostile to me for a long time because I stole his third son, He Yucheng's, championship. Now, because of my sister's problem and my ruining his plans, the two of us are like fire and water. With such a human shield in hand, I can save a lot of trouble." The two siblings traveled quickly and soon returned to the Qin manor. When Qin Lianshan saw that his children had returned safely, he was extremely excited. At the same time, when the imperial edict was sent to Prince Akaji, the Emperor of Baiyu announced to the entire country, July 18th, the new royal Eastwood Qin will be granted the title. With the Great Song Mountain as the center, the South Cloud State and the Green Tree State will become the royal Qin's territory. Prince Akaji's territory will be compensated by the royal family. The rest of the material rewards will be delivered by the royal ambassadors. July 18th was an auspicious day. It was suitable for granting titles and holding ceremonies. The imperial edict also arrived at Eastwood Town. It ordered the Qin family to prepare for the ceremony on July 18th. At that time, the royal family representatives would come to the Qin manor. All the powerful people in the country would also come to congratulate them. For the Eastwood Qin family, it was a double blessing. For a time, they had become the hottest topic in the entire country. Initially, Qin Lianshan was doubtful about whether the royal family would honor the promised rewards. Only when the imperial edict arrived did his doubts disappear. Of course, Qin Wushuang knew his father's thoughts. He laughed. "Father, facts speak louder than words, right?" Qin Lianshan sighed. "If this had happened a few years ago, I would never have dreamed of this scene. Our Eastwood Qin family is qualified to be promoted to a royal family. Wushuang, this is all thanks to you." "Father, it's not long until July 18th. In these days, everyone will be busy. For this ceremony, I think all the powerful aristocrats from all over the country will come to congratulate us. Although we are not trying to show off, we should at least match the style of the royal family." Qin Lianshan agreed. "I also have the same plan. Fortunately, the Qin manor has enough manpower. I've already asked Cixi to call back 100 strong men from the farm. They will wait for orders. Yes, I estimate that there will be at least 200 guests coming this time. We also have 200 or 300 servants and maids in the manor. If we send 100 strong men and ask them to bring their spouses to help, we will have more than enough manpower. By the way, Father, are you satisfied with this land?" Qin Wushuang asked with a smile. Qin Lianshan praised, very satisfied. The emperor is so understanding. He knows that the ancestors of the Qin family lived here. Obviously, he had considered this situation. Qin Wushuang sneered. It's not that the emperor is so understanding. This land was chosen by me. You chose it? Qin Lianshan was stunned. Yes, at the Martial Saint Mountain. The Martial Saint spread out the map and gave me a pen. He asked me to draw a circle. Wherever I drew, that would be our land. Qin Lianshan was even more stunned. His throat tightened. The Martial Saint is so generous? Then if you draw a circle on the map, wouldn't it be? Then he laughed. Wushuang, you did a good job. This land is not too much and not too little. It is enough for a royal family. If we add more, I am afraid that those Wangs will have objections. Objections from those Wangs? I dare to believe that there are already Wangs with the same surname who are unhappy. For example, the Redwood King. Father, you see, this time, our land was basically taken from Prince Akaji. That Redwood King is a formidable character. He did not dare to disobey the Martial Saint when he wanted to cut his own flesh. However, behind his back, he must have viewed the Eastwood Qin family as his mortal enemy. It would have been better if Qin Lianshan had not heard it. In the past, to Qin Lianshan, the royal family was an insurmountable mountain. However, this time, the disappearance of his daughter was caused by the Redwood King. This had completely crossed Qin Lianshan's bottom line. In Qin Lianshan's eyes, his children were his reverse scale. Regardless of who it was, if they had touched his reverse scale, Qin Lianshan would deal with them to the end, even if he had to die. Wushuang, since the Martial Saint had promised us the land, so what if it's the Redwood King? Now, the Qin family is also a royal family, and we are on the same level as the Redwood King. Only, Qin Lianshan raised his head and fixed his gaze on Qin Wushuang. He could not help but ask, Wushuang, since the Martial Saint had invited you, I think you should follow the trend and agree to the Martial Saint. After all, if you agree, your identity will be different. From now on, you will be the heir to the Martial Saint. This way, everyone will know that sooner or later, you will enter the upper sky realm. In terms of authority, even a Redwood King would be weaker than you. Qin Lianshan's consideration was reasonable. From his point of view, this was the best way to protect the Qin family in the future. Once Qin Wushuang obtained the position of the heir to the Martial Saint, for sure, he would receive the respect of the entire country and enjoy the worship of the entire nation. Just from the aspect of influence, he would truly intimidate the entire country. At that time, the royal Qin family would have the right to stand among the 5 royal families in the country. However, Qin Wushuang's consideration was much further than Qin Lianshan's. If he agreed to enter the Martial Saint Mountain, it meant that regardless of whether he was willing or not, his fate would be tied to the Martial Saint Mountain. To an elite warrior who was determined to train, this would not be a good thing. It was not that he did not have any feelings for the Bayou country. However, he felt that entering the Martial Saint Mountain was not the most important thing to protect the Bayou country. The most important thing was the extent of his strength in the end. If his strength could suppress all the Martial Saints from the neighboring countries, then even if he did not enter the Martial Saint Mountain, he could still intimidate the neighboring countries. What he valued the most was whether he could be free and unrestrained on the path of martial arts training. Father, the most important thing is not whether I am the heir to the Martial Saint, but when I can enter the upper sky. Qin Wushuang sighed. My biggest goal now is to break into the upper sky. In another 3 months, I will go to the mother country. At that time, it will be the best time to broaden my horizons and break into the upper sky. No one knew his son better than his father. In these years, Qin Lianshan had already understood his son's personality. He knew that his son had a firm ambition in martial arts training. Thinking back to these years, each of his son's decisions had brought endless benefits to the family. The entire Eastwood Qin clan was like a blazing sun that was slowly rising, like the sun in the middle of the sky. Thus, he must have his reasons for making such a decision. When he thought here, Qin Lianshan encouraged him. Okay, Wushuang, since this is your choice, I will support you unconditionally. As July 18th approached, the entire Qin manor became busier. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. On this day, Tong Yao came to the Qin manor and brought the 18 types of poisons that Qin Wushuang needed. She had come with another identity. She was here to congratulate him on behalf of the Tong family of the Green Tree State. After the ceremony, the Green Tree State would become the territory of the royal Qin family. Of course, it was necessary to establish a good relationship with the king of the territory. Qin Wushuang chatted with Tong Yao for a while. After settling her down, he left with the 18 types of poisons. Of course, he had his reasons for wanting these 18 types of poisons. He wanted to make a tyrannical poison from the ancient martial arts world from his former world. It was called the 7 Insects and 7 Flowers Ointment. The 7 Insects and 7 Flowers Ointment was made from 7 types of poisonous insects and 7 types of poisonous flowers. The poisoned person would first feel a numbing itch in their internal organs, as if the 7 insects were biting them. Then, colorful lights would appear in front of their eyes. It was known as one of the 3 supreme poisons in the ancient martial arts world. It was quite terrifying. Qin Wushuang knew the prescription and the way to make it. Therefore, it was easy for him to make the ointment. In less than 3 days, he made 6 different types of 7 insects and 7 flowers ointment, 9 types of poisonous insects, and 9 types of poisonous flowers. If I were to deduce it, I could make at least 10 different types of 7 insects and 7 flowers ointment. However, these 6 types of ointment are enough. If you want to detoxify the poison, you have to know which 7 types of poisonous insects and which 7 types of poisonous flowers I used. Otherwise, of course, Qin Wushuang had prepared this 7 insects and 7 flowers ointment for He Yufei. He knew very well that with the Redwood King's tyrannical personality, he would not give up so easily. Keeping this as a last resort was also Qin Wushuang's last resort. When necessary, he could use it to defeat the enemy. As the saying goes, a great man must be ruthless. Against a formidable person like the Redwood King, Qin Wushuang could not afford to be careless. P.S. Everyone, don't go away. There will be 2 consecutive explosions later. The interval is only 10 minutes. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 121. The 18th of July arrived as promised. Guests from all over the country arrived in droves. If it weren't for the fact that the local government had ordered those lower-level aristocrats not to follow the trend, most likely, the Eastwood Qin family would not have been able to accommodate all the guests, even if they had prepared 1,000 banquet tables. Thus, those who could come to congratulate the Qin family were basically the elites and upper-level aristocrats. Not long ago, the venerable family had been the unchanging authority in River County for hundreds of years. Now, they had become the lowest qualification for the Qin family's guests. The world was unpredictable, and the speed of change made people gasp in amazement. All 4 royal territories, including the Redwood Mansion, had sent representatives to attend. Especially Prince Akaji, the Redwood King himself, had come. And for the other 3 territories, only the children with the highest status in the royal family had come. Basically, they were the successors of their respective royal territories. The reason why they were so cautious was that they had already recognized the rise of the Qin family. They realized that they could not change this trend. If they went against the current, they would bring disaster to themselves. Since they could not change it, then they could only follow the trend. What was the trend? The trend was that Qin Wushuang had won 2 prizes in the martial arts student exam. The trend was that Qin Wushuang had made the imperial uncle, Song Lingfeng, admit defeat. The trend was that the martial saint had appointed the royal family of the Eastwood Qin family. This was the trend. Whoever did not recognize this trend, they would not only become the enemy of the Qin family, they would also become the enemy of the Martial Saint Mountain. What kind of place was the Martial Saint Mountain? It was the supreme core of the Zhen Wu holy place. All the winds in the Bayou country had started from the Martial Saint Mountain. The arrival of the 4 royal families had made those civilians in Eastwood Town who had never seen the world cry out in joy. It was an eye-opening experience. However, the arrival of the four royal families was only a small interlude. When the representative of the royal family, the current crown prince, He Yunxiang, had appeared in Eastwood Town, the entire town had boiled over. Ever since the establishment of Eastwood Town, no offspring of the royal family had ever arrived, not to mention the current crown prince, the future emperor. However, the climax did not end there. Just when everyone was still savoring the wonderful feeling of the crown prince's arrival, an even bigger climax had arrived. From the Zhenwu holy place, the four honored warriors from the martial Saint Mountain had arrived together. They came together to boost the Qin family's prestige and congratulate them. This time, Eastwood Town went completely crazy. In the Bayou country, the four great honored warriors of the Zhenwu holy place were like legends. They had walked out from the legends and appeared before everyone. The Qin manor could be said to be graced by her presence. Those able-bodied men were all jubilant and worked even harder. They had been repeatedly told that they had to perform well and not embarrass the Qin family. Currently, the Qin family was the royal Qin. Whoever lost face would lose the face of the entire royal Qin family. The guests took their seats. The four venerables, His Highness the Crown Prince, and the representatives of the four great royal families sat in the main seats without any dispute. The other guests all knew the rules very well. They all took their seats according to their status, and there was no confusion at all. The crown prince stood up and said with a smile, "Everyone, before the banquet begins, this crown prince will first go through the necessary procedures. Please accept the imperial edict." Qin Lianshan and Qin Wushuang didn't hesitate at all and hurried over. All the guests also stood up solemnly. The crown prince waved his hand and said, "Today is a joyous occasion. Although it is a conferment ceremony, there is no need for anyone to kneel. Just stand and listen to the ceremony. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Crown Prince, for your grace." Everyone was waiting solemnly. Not a single one of the four great venerables had a smile on their faces as they watched this scene calmly. Only they could maintain such an aloof attitude. Qin Wushuang, son of the Eastwood Qin family, in this year's martial arts student exam, won the individual and team contribution. Our Bayou country was founded on martial arts, and we respect martial arts. We will honor all rewards. According to the agreement, the individual winner will be conferred the title of king, 20,000 acres of land, and 60,000 gold. The team contribution champion will be conferred the title of marquis, 10,000 acres of land, and 30,000 gold. In total, 30,000 acres of land and 90,000 gold. Qin Wushuang has both ability and integrity. Today, his father, Qin Wushuang, will be conferred the title of King Chaoshan and enjoy the treatment of the royal family. Qin Wushuang will be conferred the title of Marquis Wushuang and also enjoy the treatment of the royal family. Qin Xiu will be conferred the title of Princess Donglin and also enjoy the treatment of the royal family. The Qin family's territory will be named the Heavenly Royal Territory. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire audience cheered. Thunderous claps sounded from all directions and waves of applause. Although Qin Lianshan tried hard to control his emotions, inwardly, he was still shocked when he walked up to receive the imperial edict. He was too excited. This was an uncontrollable excitement, an ecstasy from the bottom of his heart. Qin Xiu did not expect that she would also be conferred a title. The Shi Ming, who was next to her, was also happy for Qin Xiu. After the crown prince had finished reading, he sat down with a smile and said, "King Chaoshan, Marquis Wushuang, congratulations. I hope that the Qin family will work together with the royal family and contribute their strength to the Bayou country to protect the safety of our country. Your Highness, the Qin family will be loyal to our country and repay your kindness." Good, good, good. The purple-robed great honored warrior took the lead to clap. "King Chaoshan, your son should be like Qin Wushuang. I am impressed." Qin Lianshan immediately returned the gesture. Between the movements of the purple-robed great honored warrior, he easily suppressed the scene and said with a smile, "Everyone, I am also friends with Qin Wushuang despite the difference in age. I will take advantage of my seniority to say a few words. The Eastwood Qin family established themselves through martial arts and became a legend of the royal family. All of this could be explained by 4 words. Heaven rewards the diligent. In the world of martial arts, there is no unachievable legend. The Eastwood Qin family is everyone's role model. Before the exam, all of you here had a higher status than the Qin family. And now, most of you have to look up to the Qin family and be jealous of them. Why is this? It's still those 4 words. Heaven rewards the diligent. After the purple-robed, great honored warrior had finished speaking, he glanced around lightly and said again, "On the surface, you are all smiling. Perhaps some of you think that the Qin family only got lucky. However, I want to tell you that in the setting of this martial arts student exam, perhaps luck played a role in some small details. However, in the general direction, luck will never affect the final result. Not to mention, they are a few 100% ahead of the other martial arts students. Among you, if you feel unconvinced, you can ask among your family's martial arts students who participated in the exam, are there any who are above stage 6 of the genuine force? Stage 6 of the genuine force? How is this possible? Most of them had just graduated from the martial arts academy. Even if they had trained for 1 or 2 years, it would be an exaggeration to say that they had reached stage 2 or 3 of the genuine force. Most likely, even those royal offspring would need a few years of training to reach stage 6, right? It was impossible for them to enter stage 6 of the genuine force right after they had graduated. According to my information, among the martial arts students who participated in the exam, none of them were close to Qin Wushuang in terms of strength. Please note that this old man said close. Close? Could it be that the strength of this son of the Qin family was higher than stage 6 of the genuine force? No wonder the Zhanwu holy place placed such importance on him. Inwardly, Shi Minyu, who understood the inside story, smiled bitterly. Stage 6? The words of the great honored warrior could easily cause misunderstandings. Even though he was the patriarch of a feudal lord family and was at stage 9 of the genuine force, he could not gain any advantage from this son of the Qin family. With such strength, how could he only be at stage 6? The purple-robed, great honored warrior smiled lightly. I can only say that with Qin Wushuang's strength, the other martial arts students who participated in the exam could never catch up to him. They don't even have the qualifications to look at his back. Such a genius martial arts student, does he deserve to be a royal? As soon as he said these words, all the guests became silent. Everyone knew that the great honored warrior was creating momentum for the royal Qin family and supporting them. Crown Prince He Yunxiang nodded with a smile. I can testify to the words of the great honored warrior. Indeed, Marquis Wushuang's strength is shocking. Apparently, the purple-robed, great honored warrior did not expect that the Crown Prince would step out to agree with him. He nodded to the Crown Prince. Since the Crown Prince has spoken, everyone should know better. I have nagged so much because I wanted to express one point. The royal family and the Zhanwu holy place had agreed on the Eastwood Qin becoming a royal. The royal status is unquestionable and unshakable. If anyone doubts this royal status, you could go to the Martial Saint Mountain and argue with the Martial Saint. The other 3 great honored warriors all nodded to show their agreement. Qin Wushuang smiled casually and did not speak a word. Since the 4 great honored warriors had spoken, he did not need to worry about this situation. Even if someone doubted this royal status, most likely their doubts would disappear after the 4 great honored warriors had expressed their firm stance. Marquis Wushuang, are you not going to say a few words? Apparently, the purple-robed, great honored warrior wanted to bring Qin Wushuang out and lead the topic to him. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and nodded. Everyone, the Qin family had faced many obstacles along the way from the humble class. For each step forward, some people thought it was due to luck. I, Qin Wushuang, only have one principle. Whether it is a mule or a horse, I will bring it out for a walk. The Bayou country is a country built on martial arts. For any matter, strength is the most persuasive. The family class evaluation is held once every 20 years. If anyone doubts the royal Qin family, you are welcome to issue a challenge after 20 years. Still the same words. Use strength to speak. The purple-robed, great, honored warrior nodded with appreciation. Qin Wushuang's words were neither high-profile nor low-key. Yet, he had shown enough temperament. If you're not convinced, you can come and issue a challenge. This was the most primitive and direct principle in the martial arts world. Since the Qin family is the king of a territory, from now on, within the heavenly royal territory, regardless of status or age, all citizens will be under the protection of the royal Qin family. If there are foreign powerhouses that commit murder or arson, we will kill without mercy. If there are foreign powerhouses that rob and rape, we will kill without mercy. If there are... Qin Wushuang spoke with a cold tone. Each of his words was sonorous and powerful. While he spoke, he swept across the entire scene with a determined gaze. His gaze stopped on the Redwood King for a moment before he moved away. Inwardly, the Redwood King only sneered and thought, "Today, I will let you be arrogant. After a while, you will suffer." The Shiheng looked at Qin Wushuang. Between his movements, he was full of aggressiveness. Vividly, he already had the temperament of a king. Inwardly, he also smiled bitterly. He had to admit that he, as the head of the house, had made a fatal mistake regarding the son of the Qin family. Fortunately, that idiot of his insisted. When he saw the Shi Ming and Qin Xiu rubbing their heads together, the Shiheng, a stage 7 genuine force warrior and the head of the venerable family, felt as sweet as honey. Royal family. From now on, the backing of the venerable De Shi family would be the royal family. The rise of the venerable De Shi family was something to look forward to. P.S. After 10 minutes, there will be a 5th update. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com to read more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 122. After the end of the ceremony, the half-a-month deadline between Qin Wushuang and the Redwood King had arrived. Without anyone noticing, Qin Wushuang had applied the 7 insects and 7 flower ointment on He Yufei. Then he sent a member of the Falcon team to escort He Yufei out of the heavenly royal territory. After the appointment ceremony, the Redwood King had talked to Qin Wushuang alone. The two of them had engaged in a battle of words. Apparently, they had a tacit understanding. The Redwood King knew that it was Qin Wushuang who had taken He Yufei, and Qin Wushuang also knew that the Redwood King had grasped this fact and did not deny it. Qin Wushuang knew that with the temperament of the Redwood King, it was only a matter of time before they turned hostile. However, Qin Wushuang also knew that now was not the time to declare war on the Redwood King. After all, the Qin family had just become a royal family. If they were in a rush to declare war on the Redwood King, it would make the atmosphere of the entire Bayou country extremely strange. It would inevitably create a misconception that a royal family with a different surname would suppress the He family. To a new royal family, it would be absolutely disadvantageous. Of course, this was only a matter of reputation. If they were to turn hostile, they could completely ignore the reputation. The reason why Qin Wushuang did not make a move was because of strength. Currently, in the Qin family, Qin Wushuang was the only elite warrior. Although he was only at stage 9 of the genuine force, in the entire Redwood King mansion, there were 5 stage 9 warriors. Among them, the Redwood King himself was a powerful stage 9 warrior. His strength would not lose to Qin Wushuang. In addition to the 4 stage 9 elders, the difference in strength between the Redwood Mansion and the Qin family could be said to be obvious. It was a completely one-sided situation. To reverse this one-sided situation, there was only one way. That was to enter the Upper Sky Realm. Only by entering the Upper Sky Realm could one completely ignore the disadvantage of having more elite warriors. Qin Wushuang had fully experienced the difference between the Upper Sky and the Pre-Sky Realm at the Martial Saint Mountain. The Martial Saint had already given him the most vivid lesson. The day I enter the innate realm will be the day of the Redwood King's misfortune. Qin Wushuang thought to himself. In this world, there is no such thing as being reserved. Since they were destined to be like fire and water, it was only a matter of time before they would fight to the death. Regardless of whether he is from the royal He family, as long as he poses a threat to the existence of the Qin clan, he deserves to die. Thinking of this, Qin Wushuang's mouth revealed a trace of killing intent. Since he had been granted a king's domain, he had to build a king's city. With Eastwood Town as the core, a blueprint for the construction of the city was quickly drawn up. With the Great Song Mountains as its back, the blueprint for a new royal city had been formed along the three directions, including River County. Qin Wushuang's considerations were very clear. No matter what, they couldn't give up the fertile land of the Great Song Mountains. He didn't know why, but Qin Wushuang always felt that these 1,000 miles of Great Song Mountains contained countless unknown secrets waiting for him to explore. Thus, when a martial saint had asked him to enclose his own land, he had included the Great Song Mountains without hesitation. Now, the Great Song Mountains had become part of the Qin clan's territory and their private property. This made Qin Wushuang feel like he was sitting on a treasure trove. 3 years. It might take 3 years to build this royal city. In 3 years, I must train a group of men of sacrifice, an iron army that completely belongs to the heavenly royal territory. Qin Wushuang spent half a month to draw up a lot of plans, including how to expand the army, how to build the city, how to set up the defense, how to train the troops. He didn't need to do these things himself. Now, the Qin clan and the venerable De Shi family had both agreed to the relationship between Qin Xiu and De Shi Ming. The venerable De Shi family could already share many of the burden. De Shi Hung knew how to judge the situation and knew his own position. Now, River County had been allocated to the heavenly royal territory and was under the rule of the royal Qin family. Of course, he knew how to be a subordinate. With the venerable De Shi father and son sharing the burden on Qin Lianshan's shoulders had become much lighter. At this time, De Shi Ming had fully displayed his talent as an offspring of a venerable family. He had managed all the big and small matters in an orderly manner. After Qin Wushuang had drawn up all the plans, he would not do them himself. Now it was the time to test the abilities of these people. Now, the only thing on his mind was to practice martial arts. Practice martial arts, break through, and advance to the upper sky realm. Since he had returned home, he would go to the Great Song Mountains to practice martial arts every day. It was an unshakable task. For some unknown reason, Qin Wushuang had a subtle sense of attachment to the Great Song Mountains. In this lifetime, he had only felt comfortable when he was practicing martial arts at the Great Song Mountains. He felt that it was the best place for him to practice martial arts. Somehow, when he had been at the Martial Saint Mountain, he had felt a similar feeling as he had at the Great Song Mountains. Thus, Qin Wushuang had a good first impression of the Martial Saint Mountain. The power of nature. What is the power of nature? Qin Wushuang sat between the precipitous cliffs and thought hard every day to feel the power of nature that the martial saint had talked about. The movement of the sun, moon, and stars, the growth of flowers and trees, lightning and thunder, rain, snow, wind, and frost, these are all the ways of nature. But how do I introduce this natural way into my body? Qin Wushuang thought. This was a completely new topic. It was a field that he had never touched before. In the past, he liked to practice the sun force at the peak of the Great Song Mountains at noon. It seemed to be a way to use the power of nature. However, that kind of use was not absorbing the power of nature, but using the natural environment to accelerate the movement of the sun force in his body. After all, it was not using the power of nature for his own use. There was a world of difference between the acquired realm and the upper realm. The martial saint said that the upper realm spiritual martial force is divided into 4 stages. The first 3 stages are to control 10% of the power of nature, 20% of the power of nature, and 30% of the power of nature. Speaking of which, This theory is extremely simple. However, how do I divide the 10%, 20%, and 30%? Qin Wushuang's mind was filled with questions. Whatever, at least for now, I do not have any signs of breaking through. However, in this period of time, my cultivation did not stagnate. It seems that I have improved a lot in the realm of stage 9 of the genuine force. Right now, I should have recovered 100% of the power I had in my previous life. As Qin Wushuang thought, he suddenly stood up and moved his fingers. The coagulated sword moved as he wished. As soon as the sword intent appeared, it was like moving clouds and flowing water as it continuously poked out from his fingers. This coagulated sword was evolved from the coagulated finger, but its power was many times stronger than the coagulated finger. It was to condense all the qi in one's body into the 5 fingers and shoot it out through the air. Regardless of speed, accuracy, or power, it was many times stronger than the coagulated finger. Although it was called a sword art, it was actually a super martial technique between the fingers. It was no small matter. Ever since Qin Wushuang started practicing the coagulated finger, he had never stopped exploring the coagulated sword. He knew that once he mastered this martial technique, its power and killing power would be at least 10 times stronger than the 9 suns' palms. Condensing the fingers into a sword, taking things out of thin air, killing people without a trace. This was the profound meaning of the coagulated sword. His 2 hands moved continuously, his fingers like jumping elves. As he moved, the sword chi of the coagulated sword shot out, causing the air to tremble and leaves to fly everywhere. The thumb of the left hand corresponded to the lung meridian of the Hantayin. It was called the Little Shang sword. The sword chi was large and powerful. When used, it was like a silver waterfall flowing backwards. It was also like swallowing the sun and moon. It had the power to swallow mountains and rivers. The sword chi of the Little Shang sword was the middle rushing sword. It specialized in training the middle finger of the right hand. It corresponded to the pericardium meridian of the Hanjian meridian. When used, it was majestic and powerful. It was very similar to Qin Wushuang's martial technique. The coagulated sword had a total of 6 grades. Currently, what Qin Wushuang was training in was the lowest grade of the 6th grade, having substance but not form. The sword chi of this grade was called the Void Sword. In his previous life, all the ancient martial experts, including the Dali Duan family that inherited the coagulated sword, had only trained to the lowest grade of the 1st grade, which was the Void Sword. As for the 5th grade and above, it was only recorded in theory. As for the specifics, no one had ever trained to those supreme realms. Based on speculation, if one continued to train, unless they entered the Xiantian realm, they would not be able to break through the grade of the coagulated sword. However, even if it was the lowest grade of the 1st grade, even if it was the Void Sword, in the ancient martial world of his previous life, the coagulated sword was unquestionably the ultimate martial technique. There were no more than 10 martial techniques that could be compared to it. Qin Wushuang dashed left and right, using both left and right at the same time. One was the Little Shang sword, the other was the Zhongcheng sword. The 2 swords attacked together, attacking and withdrawing at the same time. It was as if 2 people were using the coagulated sword at the same time, increasing the power. Normally, if one's inner strength had not reached the peak of the postliminary realm, and if one's entire body was filled with true qi, it would be extremely difficult to use the coagulated sword with one hand, not to mention using both. This had an extremely high requirement for the user's inner strength. At the same time, it also had extremely harsh requirements for movement, technique, and control. If any of these points were lacking, then one would not be able to use the coagulated sword perfectly. If one could not use the coagulated sword wholeheartedly, it was very likely that the user would suffer a backlash. Firstly, the true qi was condensed and could not be shot out. This would cause the true qi circuit and cause a backlash. Secondly, if the sword qi that should be shot out was not shot out, then it was equivalent to selling one's life to the enemy. Thus, the power of the coagulated sword was unparalleled, but in the past few thousand years, it had not been passed down much. It was because the conditions to use it were too harsh, and the cultivation was too difficult. If one was not a martial arts grandmaster, one would not be worthy of the coagulated sword. Qin Wushuang shuttled back and forth. His entire body was indescribably clear, and he felt indescribably refreshed. Every time he stabbed the sword, he felt as if a stream of anger was shooting out from his chest. It was incomparably exhilarating. Chi. The sword Qi was like a rainbow, shooting straight into the sky. Qin Wushuang shouted again and again, as if he wanted to release all of his desire for the post-liminary realm into this coagulated sword. This was the first time he had used this sword technique to his heart's content since his reincarnation. This was a kind of epiphany, a kind of sudden enlightenment, as if the clouds had cleared and the sky had become clear. Unknowingly, Qin Wushuang had once again taken an extremely important step on the path of martial arts cultivation. Although at this time, he himself did not know how important this step was to his future. Author's note: everyone should know that the coagulated sword is actually the Six Pulses godly sword. In order to avoid any disputes over the publishing rights, it is called coagulated sword. Of course, it is not a complete copy of the original Six Pulses godly sword. Here, this sword technique has a more magical setting. I believe everyone can see that this is a new martial technique that was created to complement the breakthrough to the post-liminary realm. In the future, there will be another martial technique to complement the coagulated sword. Everyone guess what it is. It is definitely not the Flaming Sun scripture. Today's 5 chapters have already been fulfilled, but the monthly votes have been blown up again and again. This is unbearable. Warriors of the Xing He warriors. Qin Wushuang has already drawn his sword. Everyone draw your sword. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.qidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 123. Carefree, delightful, comfortable. Qin Wushuang slowly withdrew his power, stabilized his footsteps, and slowly breathed in and out, harmonizing the true qi in his body. Qin Wushuang is very particular about this point. In his previous life, when he used martial arts, he rarely paid attention to harmonizing his true qi. Because of this, the true qi in his body accumulated, causing the true qi to backfire and go mad. Now that he has been reborn, Qin Wushuang is very cautious about this problem. He will not allow any mistakes. As he slowly opened his eyes, Qin Wushuang only felt that his entire body was calm and comfortable. Just as he is about to stretch his body and prepare to go down the mountain, his eyes suddenly stop at the top of the cliff. Rubbing his eyes, he can't believe what he is seeing. 3 more steps, there is a bottomless abyss in front of him. But in this bottomless abyss, it is as if a huge treasure house was suddenly opened. Inside, there are 5 gorgeous rays of light, soaring to the sky, dazzling and astonishing. It is as if a 7-colored rainbow in the sky is suddenly pulled straight by someone, vertically falling down the cliff, dazzling and dazzling. That brilliance is divided into 5 colors. The 5 rays of light are neat and tidy, like 5 restless dragons, constantly struggling to jump up into the sky. It is as if this bottomless abyss has become a prison that fetters them. What is this? Qin Wushuang has never seen such a strange scene in his previous life. Even in the movie special effects, he can't imagine such a strange scene in front of him. Could it be that there's really a treasure under this cliff? Qin Wushuang's thoughts are constantly turning, as if this brilliance has a very strong attraction to him, like a huge treasure house, waiting for him to explore. Qin Wushuang can't help but move his feet. 3 steps, he is at the edge of the cliff. 1 more step, he is at the bottomless abyss. There's a saying, take a step back and you will see the sea and sky. However, at this moment, Qin Wushuang had developed a wave of miraculous feeling. A form of primitive impulse was driving him forward. Take a step forward and you will see the sea and sky. Thinking of this, Qin Wushuang does not hesitate to go down and see what is going on. There were too many things in this world that he couldn't understand, so he decided to go down and see for himself. With the experience of saving De Shiming, Qin Wushuang was already very familiar with the structure of this sheer cliff. Unfamiliar the first time, familiar the second time. As he kept falling, in a moment he had arrived at the place where he had saved De Shiming. Looking up, it was still hazy. Only the 5 streaks of light were still bouncing around relentlessly, as if they were within reach, but when they really wanted to reach out and grab them, they found that they were very far away. Qin Wushuang no longer hesitated and continued to descend. After about 4 to 5 kilometers, Qin Wushuang finally saw the specific location of a light source. About 300 to 400 meters horizontally, there was an abrupt hole made of strange rocks. It looked like a gap in the mysteries of heaven and earth. The 5 beams of light shot out. Qin Wushuang hurriedly moved sideways. After all, he had to get to the bottom of this. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. Moving horizontally was much easier than descending vertically. Plus, he had almost reached the bottom of the cliff. The strange rocks were rugged, and there were constantly protruding stone spikes on the cliff for him to climb. In the blink of an eye, Qin Wushuang had arrived at the edge of the hole. The 5 beams of light seemed to have existed since the beginning of time. The radiance was circular and gave people a feeling of vastness and subtlety. Regardless of how bold Qin Wushuang was, he did not dare to touch it. After all, he still had not figured out the principle behind these lights. As he approached slowly, Qin Wushuang broke one of the vines along the way. Then, he shot out his palm power towards that light source. With this hit, something strange happened. This light source was like a pre-written program that was suddenly interrupted. Immediately, the light faded and completely disappeared. The speed of its disappearance was as fast as a person's eyes opening and closing. After the light had disappeared, Qin Wushuang fixed his eyes and looked at the hole. There was nothing else. Qin Wushuang bent his body and entered. The entrance of this cave was not wide. When he walked in, he found that it was actually a large karst cave. The deeper he went, the more serene it became. Qin Wushuang was greatly surprised. After walking for a while, the winding path led to a secluded place, and suddenly, the inside of the cave opened up. Before Qin Wushuang's eyes, it was an underground karst cave that was as big as a palace. It was obvious that someone had lived in this cave before. There were many man-made decorations inside. It was just like a palace, giving people a very grand feeling. Qin Wushuang went deeper. The terrain was sometimes high and sometimes low, sometimes up and sometimes down, changing constantly. Inside and outside, there were actually more than 10 levels. Every level had different carvings and decorations. Every level was very spacious and grand. It was simply a completely different world. TSK. I wonder who developed this karst cave. It's so majestic. Indeed, there are some stories behind this great Song Mountain. Qin Wushuang thought. He had always had a subtle feeling about the Great Song Mountain. He also had a strange intuition that the Great Song Mountain was the biggest wealth of Eastwood Town and an unexplored treasure trove. Certainly, there must be some unsolved mysteries hidden inside. However, Qin Wushuang could not explain the mysteries of the Great Song Mountain at the moment. When his feet were just pulled, Qin Wushuang complained incessantly in his heart. But at this moment, his mood was abnormal, and there was a very wonderful feeling of enjoyment. Yes, it was enjoyment. The power and magic of this force was that it not only invaded Qin Wushuang's body, but also went deep into his soul. Even Qin Wushuang's soul seemed to be completely occupied. However, this was a pleasant baptism, just like a believer receiving a religious baptism. It was solemn and wonderful, and his mood was peaceful without any worries, as if this was the passage to eternity. A very strong hint, like a call from ancient times. Just like this, the peak of happiness was in front of him. Qin Wushuang was attracted by such a call, and there was no other thought in his mind. It was a wonderful feeling, like a torch in the middle of winter, like a bowl of ice water in the middle of a scorching hot summer. Qin Wushuang's facial features, 7 orifices, pores, and acupoints were like countless large and small doors, and at this moment, they were knocked open by a mysterious force, enthusiastically welcoming the entry of this external force. And Qin Wushuang himself did not know that at this moment, his whole body was wrapped in the 5-colored brilliance. His whole body was like a halo, an egg at the beginning of chaos, crystal clear and smooth as fat. This 5-colored brilliance was emitted from the Earth's core and unceasingly spread from his feet to his whole body, wrapping Qin Wushuang in it, making Qin Wushuang feel like he had returned to the mother's body, as if he had been reborn. However, this mother's body was not a mother's body in the physiological sense, but a mother's body in the macroscopic sense of the universe. The whole big ball of light was like a belly that had been pregnant for 10 months, solemn and great. At this moment, Qin Wushuang was incomparably calm. From his soul to every inch of skin and fur on his body, there was no resistance at all, but instead he let nature take its course and accepted all reality. As if everything was supposed to be like this, and there was no need to consider it all. This kind of situation did not know how long it had been, as if it was just a snap of the fingers, and also as if an eternity had passed, as if thousands of vicissitudes of life had passed, but also as if everything was before a thought, as if an era had passed, but when he opened his eyes, the cliff was still that cliff, and the cave was still that cave. The brilliance on Qin Wushuang's body was like a 5-colored flower blooming, with 5 petals peeling outwards, and the 5 rays of brilliance also gradually dimmed, until there was nothing left. Thanks to Gugo 1982, yesterday each person gave 20 votes to Li Tian, otherwise the monthly votes would be incomparably tragic, haha. Continue to work hard today, and if there are no accidents, there will definitely be 4 chapters. As for whether there will be 5 chapters, it will depend on whether the brothers are awesome or not. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 124. As he stood up, the only feeling Qin Wushuang had was he had been reborn, and this rebirth was like a phoenix rising from the ashes. He had been reborn from the ashes. When he opened his eyes and looked around, he could not help but feel dumbfounded. The originally neat stone path beneath his feet had been completely crushed by an invisible force. The ground was completely covered in dust, and a huge crater was formed on the ground. It was 3 meters deep. Although Qin Wushuang could not confirm what had happened, he knew that the scene a moment ago was not ordinary. Could it be? Qin Wushuang felt it was unimaginable. He still remembered that when he had shown his talent, his father had expressed his doubts about his sudden increase in strength. He had then said that he had encountered some fortuitous opportunities in the Great Song Mountains. Could it be that, in the unseen world, there was some fortuitous opportunity that was calling for him? Qin Wushuang smiled bitterly. With a miraculous nature, it could not be this effective, right? A joke could become a prophecy? Regardless of what Qin Wushuang thought, the scene that had happened to him was indeed miraculous and sudden. His intuition was that the Great Song Mountains were indeed miraculous. Qin Wushuang had always felt that the Great Song Mountains had a special attraction that was calling for him at all times. Even in his dreams, it would not leave him. Could it be it was this miraculous power? He looked at the sky and saw that it was almost dusk. Since he had come out in the morning, he had only practiced 1 set of coagulated sword. Then, he had been attracted to this place by that 5-colored light. It had only taken him 2 hours to explore the cave. This way, that miraculous feeling from before had lasted for half a day. Since it was already late, Qin Wushuang decided to go down the mountain. After all, Qin Wushuang's every move would affect the fate of the entire royal Qin family. Usually, Qin Wushuang would climb the Great Song Mountains early in the morning and return home before noon. However, today he had acted out of the ordinary. Of course, the people in the family were worried. Qin Xiu had always cared for her little brother in every possible way. She had been waiting for Qin Wushuang with the Shi Ming for a long time. Wushuang. Qin Xiu hurried to greet him. Sister, big brother to Shi. When Qin Wushuang saw their expressions, he knew the concern in their hearts. Inwardly, he was moved. Qin Xiu grabbed Qin Wushuang and looked at him from head to toe. She said in surprise, Wushuang, why are your clothes so tattered? Did you fight with a bear? In Qin Xiu's opinion, a bear was already the most ferocious animal in the world. Qin Wushuang smiled bitterly and shook his head. Sister, let's talk about this later. Did I keep you waiting? Big brother to Shi and I have run up and down the mountain a few times. The Shi Ming kept smiling. However, when his gaze stopped at Qin Wushuang's eyes, his heart suddenly trembled. He cried out involuntarily, Wushuang, what's wrong with me? Qin Wushuang was stunned. The Shi Ming was speechless. He could not describe what had happened to him at the moment. However, his first feeling was that Qin Wushuang had changed a lot. This change did not only come from his appearance, but also from his temperament. It was as if he had been reborn. It was not only his appearance that had changed, but also his spirit. In the past, if Qin Wushuang was powerful, invincible, and had outstanding strength, he still had some overbearing aura. The spirit of a young man could not be completely concealed. However, at this moment, Qin Wushuang could not see that overbearing aura at all. Instead, he saw a vast blue sky and a deep charm like the vast ocean. This was the charm. Only these two words could describe the Shi Ming's current feelings. From Qin Wushuang's body, there was a kind of calmness and smoothness, as if he had returned to his original state. This was charm. Qin Wushuang also knew where the Shi Ming's surprise came from. However, he did not show it. Seeing that the Shi Ming and his sister were inseparable, he felt happy for them from the bottom of his heart. After walking down the mountain, Qin Wushuang suddenly remembered something. His sister had married Big Brother to Shi. Whether she would be happy or safe would depend on how Big Brother to Shi treated her. I am determined to practice martial arts. I'm afraid it would be difficult for me to stay at home for a long time. My sister does not have any martial arts skills. It would be difficult for her to protect herself. She would need Big Brother to Shi to protect her. Big Brother to Shi has great talent. At such a young age, he is already at stage 5 of the genuine force. Of course, he has potential. If there is a suitable internal strength martial arts manual for him, for sure, he would advance by leaps and bounds. Big Brother to Shi's martial art style leans towards the feminine and elegant path. The small, formless skill that combines the essence of both Buddhism and Taoism would be very suitable for Big Brother to Shi. In Qin Wushuang's previous life, besides practicing martial arts, his biggest hobby was to collect ancient martial arts manuals. His biggest ambition was to gather all the ancient martial arts manuals and pass them down from generation to generation. This was to prevent these unique manuals from being lost. Thus, his memories from his previous life could be said to be a giant ancient martial arts database, a living library. Many ancient martial arts grandmasters had tried to do what he had set his sights on. However, when ancient martial arts were prevalent, there was a severe prejudice against sections. It was impossible for each sect to exchange martial arts manuals with each other. Therefore, even a great grandmaster would not be able to completely realize that great wish. When Qin Wushuang lived in the 21st century, the ancient martial arts had gradually declined. After thousands of years of inheritance, the sects had also slowly declined. Their thinking was not as narrow as before. Thus, after many years of hard work, Qin Wushuang had collected 80 to 90% of the unique martial arts manuals. However, at this time, he was targeted by a group of assassins. Although he had killed those assassins, he had died due to the backlash of his genuine qi. Thus, he had crossed over to this martial arts world. Thus, in his mind, it could be said that there was a rich treasure trove of manuals. When he returned to the manor, Qin Wushuang wanted to find his father to discuss some matters. However, he saw Shi Hung walk out of his father's room with a smile. Haha, Marquis Wushuang, you're back. Shi Hung was very happy. King Kaoshan is in the room. You're looking for him, right? Qin Wushuang nodded. Yes. Shi Hung's face was full of happiness. He said a few polite words and left. Wushuang, come in. Qin Lianshan's voice came from inside. Father, you guys seem to be in a good mood. Is there any good news? Qin Wushuang was infected by their happy smiles. He was also in a good mood. Yes, I just discussed it with Patriarch Shi. Your sister and nephew Shi are not young anymore. Father, you mean? Qin Lianshan nodded. Yes, it is a joyous occasion for the Qin family to be crowned as kings. I want to add to the good news. On the 8th of next month, we will hold the wedding. Indeed, the 8th of August sounded like a good day. Regarding Shi Ming's character, Qin Wushuang did not doubt it at all. Qin Wushuang was truly happy to see that his sister had such a good husband and a man who loved her so much. Of course, he could not find any reason to object. No wonder Shi Hung had walked out with a face full of smiles. It was because of this matter. However, Qin Xiu's current status was not the same as before. She was the daughter of the royal family and had the title of Princess Donglin. Naturally, her wedding was not a small matter. All aspects of the ceremony needed to be done. Qin Lianshan only had one daughter. Plus, Qin Xiu had sacrificed a lot for the family. Now that she was getting married, of course, they should hold a grand ceremony. Qin Wushuang found Shi Ming alone and exchanged some martial arts techniques with him. Suddenly, he said, Big brother to Shi, when I was at the Martial Saint Mountain, the Martial Saint had bestowed me with 3 martial arts techniques. I flipped through them and found that one of the martial arts techniques fits your style perfectly. According to the Martial Saint's introduction, if you can master any of these 3 martial arts techniques, you will be invincible in the secular world. Shi Ming's eyes lit up. How could the martial arts techniques bestowed by the Martial Saint be defective? Of course, it was a supreme technique. Most likely, any martial artist in the secular world would scramble for it like a flock of ducks. Qin Wushuang nodded and met Shi Ming's eager gaze. Now, big brother to Shi and my sister's wedding date has been set. You are the son-in-law of the royal Qin family and the prince of the heavenly royal territory. This martial arts technique will be the dowry of the Qin family. Only, Qin Wushuang paused for a moment and said again, this martial arts technique is only suitable for your style. However, please do not teach it to others. Shi Ming said sincerely, of course, this is the martial arts technique of the Qin family. How could I teach it to others? It's not because it's the martial arts technique of the Qin family, but because this martial arts technique came from the Martial Saint Mountain. If I teach it to others, I am afraid the Martial Saint will not be happy. Shi Ming thought for a moment and nodded as he realized, that's right. Qin Wushuang took the prepared scroll in his hand. Big brother to Shi, this is the content of this non-phase genuine martial arts. Please keep it and do not lose it. Shi Ming took it respectfully. How could he not be sincere when accepting a martial arts technique from the Martial Saint Mountain? Big brother to Shi, although the heavenly royal territory has a territory, it is still in an awkward position. There is no other reason. It is not enough to intimidate us. Although the 4 great honored warriors from the Zhanwu holy place supported us last time, not all aristocrats in the territory would be convinced and obey the royal Qin family. We need a plan for this matter. Wushuang, what are your plans? A ray of light shot out from Qin Wushuang's eyes as he said coldly, I plan to gather all aristocrats in the royal territory and show my power to make them surrender. Show your power? Shi Ming drew a breath of cold air. Currently, the influence of the royal Qin family is still not enough. There are 2 states and 2 feudal lords in the territory. It's still not enough. At least, there should be 1 feudal lord in the royal territory. I have thought about it. Since your venerable Shi family has become in-laws with the royal Qin family, it's time to raise your position. Qin Wushuang's current plan was to nurture his trusted subordinates and intimidate the other major powerhouses. I have dealt with the Shimin feudal lords in the South Cloud State a few times. It should not be a big problem. However, I have not dealt with the Nangong feudal lords in the Green Tree State alone. This time, the main target is the Nangong feudal lords. Once the Nangong feudal lords surrender, the other powerhouses in the Green Tree State would not dare to disobey. Today is the weekend. I went out for a stroll. I can only add up to 4 chapters. Same rules, 8:30, 9:30, and 2 consecutive strikes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.